NDCAP. I am, yeah, who's counting? Pine Dubois, John Mahoney, who actually resigned as chair last meeting, could not make it tonight, so he is not here. I will be attempting to negotiate the meeting, so if you would be kind, I would appreciate it. We have, I believe, to do the roll call, and maybe we'll start with the people on the screen. I see John Moylan. Why don't you start, John? You're first on the screen.
Yes, hi, fine. I'm John, Vice President of the program facility.
Thank you. Mary?
Good evening, everyone, and apologies for not being there in person, but Mary Waldron, I'm the Executive Director of the Old Colony Planning Regional Planning Agency. Good evening.
And Jack, thank you.
Jack Priest, I'm the Director of the Radiation Control Program. I'm representing the Commissioner for the Department of Public Health.
And Robert Jones?
Good evening, everyone. Robert Jones, Executive Office of Health and Human Services. I'm a designee of Secretary Mary Lou Sutters. Thank you.
Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Whitaker. I'm representing Secretary Keneally from the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development.
Thank you. Okay, to the room. Henrietta, you want to start that way, and we'll just run down the table?
I'm Henrietta Cosentino from Plymouth, appointed by the Plymouth Select Board back in November.
Hi, I'm Seth Pickering. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for the Massachusetts DEP in the Southeast region. I'm the appointee for EOEEA.
I'm Mary Lampert, and I was appointed by the Senate President.
Pine Dubois, appointed by the House Majority Leader.
I'm Mary Gatzlick. I'm a longtime resident of Plymouth, and I was appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
Dave Noyes, Compliance Manager at Holtec, representing HDI.
And we have a letter from Pat O'Brien, who is normally here representing Holtec, saying that Dave will be representing the company tonight in his stead. Thank you for doing that. We have business like that to attend to. That is a quorum. Currently, the NDCAP has 16 of its 21 members appointed. We are striving to get the vacant seats filled. Several of them, one I believe has been, that is a governor appointee. I think that Andrew Gottlieb has already been appointed. He's been recommended and appointed by the governor. He just can't make it tonight because he's got a Mashpee Board of Selectmen meeting. He's executive president of the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, and I'm delighted to have him join us. I know that the union, excuse me if I get it wrong, the 369, UWUA, I was going to get it backwards, has an appointee, is designated in the language of the enabling legislation. Paul Smith used to be that representative. He resigned in January because he felt like since he wasn't working anymore there, he couldn't do an adequate job. But they are considering who they will recommend in his stead, and it's their appointment. So we're waiting on that, basically. There is a, who else do we need? Will Smith. And we need the House Speaker and the Senate Minority Leader to appoint. So having people to recommend to them, I think, would be useful, and Sue would love to know so that she can speak to them. So the next item on the agenda is reviewing the previous meeting minutes. We had set aside the March 28th based on the number of changes that were there. I sent that out to the panel last Thursday, I believe, so that you would all have a chance to read it. I don't know what you've done, but does anybody have any additional changes or questions?
I have reviewed, and I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Who's that,
That was
Mary?
Mary Walden.
Uh,
That was
thanks.
Mary Walden.
Thanks, Mary, I appreciate it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And second by Mary Gaslick. It's a Mary kind of thing.
Is this for both minutes?
This is-
Madam Chair, or
This
which
is,
minutes are we
this is just March 28th,
Okay.
the previous minutes. So there's been a motion and a second. All in favor signify by raising your hand. That way I can read it. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 on the screen. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That looks like everybody to me. Am I wrong about that, anybody? Excuse me? Say again, somebody say something about 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Did I say 11 before? No, I was thinking Jim Cantwell was, a member, but that's my bad. I've known him too long, so,
Pine?
yes.
Pine, I think you might have 5 on the screen.
I have John Mahoney, Susan Whitaker, Jack Priest, and Robert Jones, and Mary.
And John
I have 5
Moylan,
on the
too.
screen, you're right. Thank
I
you.
think John Moylan as well.
Moylan.
Yeah, I said Moylan first, yeah, so that's 5. What happened? Thank you. 11. Jim, you're right again. Okay, so the minutes of May 23rd, these you just received on Thursday. I had just a couple of things, and mostly it was just saying that we had guests in attendance that should have been recognized. John Drabinski, who is also here tonight, and Matt Daly, as well as 17 members of the public in my count. I asked for and received Senator Markey's statement from the last meeting. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes? Aren't we glad somebody else takes the minutes?
Pine, just the one comment that I provided you earlier, the PCBs were actually found in the non-industrial portion.
Oh, yeah, and you gave it to me, didn't you?
Yes.
And it's John Drabinski, not Jack Drabinski. And page 3, Holtec update, there's a line that said, Mr. Noyes emphasized the concern regarding the PCBs that were found in it said industrial parcel, and the correction is the non-industrial parcel. So it's really a clarification. And the NRC representative, the spelling of his name was wrong, so we corrected that all 95 times, which is an exaggeration, but you get my point. Anything else, anyone? Anybody have anything from the virtual world? So I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Dave Noyes,
Second.
second by Henrietta. Any further discussion? All in favor on the hands? Yes, I have 5 on the screen and everybody in the room, so it's unanimous. Thank you goes to Tori Kim from Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, Energy and Environmental Affairs, who performs this task for us every meeting. Then we had said, when John Mahoney was here, and he informed us that he had won his seat for the Board of Selectmen in Plymouth, that he felt that it was appropriate for him to resign as chair, more because of the amount of work that he felt like he had to do, I think, in a conversation I had with him afterwards, than anything else, and that we would vote this meeting to reappoint the chairs. Our enabling legislation requires an annual vote for chairs or co-chairs and vice chair, if there is such a vice chair. So I would recommend that we concentrate on filling the panel and push that off to September so that everybody can think about that. Is that reasonable? Anybody object up there on the screen? Were you able to hear me? I would like to postpone that till September. Try to get all the appointments in order so that we know the full panel, and then we start afresh. And then maybe every September, that would be appropriate to vote on the leadership of the panel.
Pine, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone till September.
Great. Second, anybody?
I second it.
Second by Mary. Any further discussion? All in favor? Screen. Guys, raise your hands if you're in favor of that. Thank you. Oh, and Dave Nichols just joined us. Thank you very much, Dave. Awesome. So that brings us to 12. And everybody in the room raise their hand. I missed you. Thank you. So it's unanimous again. Thanks very much, Mary. I did want to mention a couple of things that the legislation said. It's always a good idea to read every word of legislation when you're supposed to be doing something. So part of the problem here is that each appointing authority, this is section 14 of chapter 188 of the Acts of 2016. Section 14B says, each appointing authority initially shall appoint a member for a 3-year term and a member for a 4-year term, in the case of the governor who has 2 appointees. Subsequent appointments under this subdivision shall be for 4 years. The ex officio, that is the members of the state agencies, shall serve until they retire or somebody else is appointed. The panel shall elect chair and co-chairs and a vice chair for 1-year terms commencing at its first meeting and following the effective date of this section. Where am I looking for this? So the problem with a 3-year appointment and a 4-year appointment is all of those of us that were appointed in 2017, like myself, we're expired. So I'm expired. Mary's not expired. Seth is here for life. You're here for life. And other members are absent, right? So we need to address that. Okay, so that's my hope that in the next 2 months we can straighten that out so that, and I would urge you guys that if you have people that know, that really have knowledge, that can really help solve our problems, that you would bring them forward to Sue Moran, to Matt Muratori, to you know, one of us if you need help doing that, and that we can then get a full panel together by the September meeting, which is the fourth Monday in September.
Could I make a comment? I think it would be useful if you would email the dates or the expiration date for all members, current members who are sitting here.
I can't do that for you.
Why?
because I don't have it. But each member should know when they were appointed, and they could send that to me, and then I could combine a list. Or maybe you can volunteer to do that, Mary. So I don't have to, because I have several grants I have to write this month.
I'd be glad to do it because
Excellent.
it would help.
I think it would help a lot, and then we can make a spreadsheet and keep track of it going forward. Everybody hear that? Dave Nichols is up on the screen. Dave would have been in the same, yeah, Dave Nichols. So Dave, you were appointed in 2017, am I correct about that? So, well, I don't know how to deal with it. That's what, so don't get technical with me here. Otherwise, we can throw out all of the meetings that we've had this year, as far as I'm concerned. So all I'm saying is, there's things to straighten out. There's things to straighten out. Lucky for you, we're not making any laws. We're just here to get information, do the best we can, but work with what we have. We don't have any staff. That's part of the problem, see? So most of us have folks. Who's this? Thank you. Thank you.
I work closely with the governor's office and their boards and commission staff. I wouldn't mind taking the lead in helping out Mary by starting a spreadsheet of the composition of the panel, and I can get that out to Mary.
Hey, good idea.
That would be very helpful. If you could copy me on that, I would appreciate it even more.
And just because terms have expired, it doesn't mean that we can't continue on with the responsibilities of the panel itself. When terms have expired, you're looked at as in holdover, and you can remain in holdover until you resign or you're replaced on the panel, or you're reappointed on the panel.
That was my understanding, too. Thank you very much.
Robert, it might be useful to members of the public to post that. We could make that a table and post that on our webpage. Who is the appointing authority and who is filling that position with the date they were appointed?
Yeah, I have all the seats identified and the individuals listed in the seats with their appointing authority, their effective date of appointment, and their expiration date.
Great. Thanks for volunteering, Robert.
I really appreciate it, too. And so does Mary.
It hasn't expired yet.
The other thing that that has happened in the last couple of weeks is that we've had a couple of emails back and forth amongst the panel and complaints as well that is not allowed. And one of the things that that was brought to my attention are, the other laws that relate to laws like this that are the administration of government laws. And it requires new members to get a copy of the open meeting law and things like this, so that we're all doing things in a way that conforms to state policy. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to be spending our time spinning wheels and stuff like that. We want to accomplish something. So that's what we'll do from now on. We'll get good copies of the open meeting law and be able to provide those. Basically, the open meeting law is just saying, look, when you're having formative conversations in private, when you're a public body, you're misrepresenting the state. You're not doing it properly. And we want to do it properly. We don't want to do it improperly. We want to do the best we can, follow the rules.
The Secretary of State has a very good manual.
Yeah, and the other thing we're supposed to do, speaking of the Secretary of State, which I never knew, given that I'm the one that's been posting the agenda for the last year plus, is give that to the Secretary of State, which I never knew. So there was no manual that came with this job. I just want you to know. It's not that I ignored it. It's just that I didn't know. So once you dive into this stuff, you'll find out more, and would like to correct those things as we go and get off on the next right foot. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, may I ask a question? Are you saying that you cannot send purely for information purposes by email to the panel? That's allowed.
I am not saying anything like that. I'm saying that you can't stimulate a conversation. And if you send information that is debatable, you're going to stimulate a conversation.
Well, that's eye of
So-
the beholder. I don't believe that's correct, so I
Well, I-
look forward to.
I look
reading.
forward to a forum from the state. Maybe
Which I
one
have.
of your guests could, maybe we could get somebody to come and give us a little information on how it would be best to, to continue representing the public and our concerns, and not run afoul of anybody's sensibilities, and keep our intentions clear. I think that's really what's.
The Attorney General is, I believe, the department that does educate on that, and will send a representative out.
And if we give them enough heads up, I think they'll be able to respond to us that way. But that is my hope, and I hope that we can take that step and become a better panel as a result of it. Okay?
This is Dave. On that issue, I'm pretty sure we went through this in the beginning. You're allowed to email the panel, and the panel can send, a member of the panel can send an email out to the group. You're just not allowed to respond.
Right.
And that's then what generates the conversation. So, Mary, I think you're right that you can, and this is not a legal opinion, I'm just, a member of the panel, but I think you can email the panel. The panel just has to be diligent in not responding and creating a conversation.
You're correct. I've chaired a committee in our town, probably before some of these people have been born, and as a result, I feel pretty assured of that, but thank you.
And that's opinions, right? So we're going to have the AG come and let us know if that's the way, and if that's the way this panel should operate, okay? So, with great relief, I invite Sue Moran to give us an update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I first want to just mention how proud I am that this room is packed. I particularly appreciate, I think I saw a young person here, so that's incredibly important to sort of be examples for the community. It's really very, very impressive. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity, and members as well, just to provide a few remarks. First of all, I just want to offer my strongest condemnation of Holtec's flagrant disregard for the concerns of the people of Plymouth and the surrounding communities. For those of you who may not know, I'm the senator for the Plymouth Barnstable District. We know the potential for pollutants and dangerous materials being discharged into our water resources impact public health, local industry, and fragile marine ecosystems. We know that Holtec has continued to minimize these impacts and fully intends to pursue their original plan to dump 1 million gallons of nuclear wastewater into Cape Cod Bay. And we know that barring significant reforms to decommissioning oversight, there's likely insufficient regulatory authority to prevent them from steamrolling the will of the public. Today you will hear from a collective of neighbors, environmental advocates, local business leaders, and elected officials. I noticed some were in front of the building. I appreciated those conversations. All united in asking questions that so far Holtec has been unable or unwilling to answer. The overwhelming negative response to Holtec's plan to discharge radioactive waste into Cape Cod Bay reflects a clear demand for greater transparency and accountability to the public. Chief among these asks is the inclusion of public disclosure stipulations for decisions that may have large-scale consequences for residents. In the fiscal year 23 budget, I secured an amendment to shift the financial burden for monitoring and oversight of current and decommissioned nuclear plants from the Commonwealth to the owners and operators of these plants, freeing up the critical Department of Public Health resources to continue the very important work of monitoring these facilities. Additionally, the Senate included language as part of its recently passed economic development package that I filed to establish a special commission to study the economic and environmental impacts of the disposal of nuclear waste into the Commonwealth's waterways. The commission would be required to complete a report on their findings and recommendations by November 1st, 2024, and hold 4 public hearings in Dukes, Plymouth, Bristol, and Barnstable counties. In the meantime, discharge of spent fuel pool water would be prohibited until 90 days after the completion of the report. Through these measures, we will provide some assurances that steps are being taken to ensure the prioritization of public safety on the state level. Any changes to the decommissioning process must include guidance and oversight. I want to acknowledge the collaborative work of the Senate President, Senate Chair of Ways and Means, Senator Sear from the Cape, Representatives Lanatra, Muratori, Leader Sarah Peake, and the support of Senators Edwards, Vilas, O'Connor, and Senate Majority Leader Tarr. That is the result of your advocacy. We're growing. It's my position that the Commonwealth should step in to alleviate the pressure on constituents to act as watchdogs for their own public health and safety. And my office has taken an active role in facilitating a platform for our communities on both sides of the Cape Cod Canal that have been left out of the decision-making process. I ask the advisory panel to do all that's within your power to do the same, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks very much, Senator Moran. We appreciate your coming down and your advocacy in the State House. Betty Cavaco, are you here? Betty, are you somewhere? You're on an attendee. Do you want to call in?
I think she's trying to be allowed to be a panelist so that she could read a statement. We can just forward an email to PAC TV.
She could, I can promote her from here if she just, I can't do anything without her asking for it, though. I don't think. Okay, so let's let her figure that out, and we'll come back to Betty. Betty is a selectman in the town of Plymouth and has a statement from the board that she wanted to present. Okay, so we'll come back. Dave, you ready to go? Holtec.
What about Jim Cantwell?
Jim didn't want to say anything tonight.
Oh, he didn't want to say.
PAC TV, how are we going to, I think you don't go up to this. Go up to this podium. Is it going to be a screen? Are you going to do a screen?
I can advance it, and I think I may have to do it from here because the slides show me
Details.
Hi, this is Mary Waldron. Betty Cavaco has her hand raised. I believe that might be.
Oh, there she goes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know what it's not doing for me, kiddo. Betty, can you just? I do not know what's going on, and our genius is busy. We're also trying to get Betty to be able to talk. She's.
Can you hear me?
We can now, yeah. Can you wait, Dave, wait for Betty, okay?
Okay.
Okay, go Betty, if that's you.
Yes, it's me. And thank you for allowing me this opportunity. My name is Betty Cavaco, and I am the chairman of the Plymouth Select Board. I appreciate these continued meetings of the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel here in Plymouth. As town officials have made clear before, we remain deeply concerned with Holtec and the NRC's lack of transparent communication with the town, its host community for the past 5 decades, about Holtec's long-term decommissioning plans. As we have repeatedly stated, our concerns are multifold, but I will focus on 2 now. The town still lacks clear information from Holtec as to its security and operational plans going forward, and the role Holtec expects the town to play in them. Local officials have received scarce information on what will be expected of them going forward and the risks of the decommissioning facility within our community. Unfortunately, to date, the town has often been the last to know of how the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or Holtec, plans to carry out its security protocols. Secondly, the town, like its neighboring communities, state and federal local officials, and the EPA, is also concerned with the lack of clarity from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and Holtec regarding the potential for discharges of water containing nuclear waste products into Cape Cod Bay. In fact, it seems that the NRC and Holtec are the only ones taking a relaxed view of this issue. Our shoreline is an important part of the town's and the nation's history and our economic future and the potential chilling effect on tourists and investment in our coast and in our Cape Cod Bay due to fears of polluted waters being added to the bay is unacceptable. Just this weekend, an inadvertent alarm at a nuclear plant in New Hampshire sent beachgoers scurrying. The silent alarm of proposed water discharges without adequate regulation or assurance of safety will have a similar effect, limiting our ability to peacefully enjoy our greatest resource. The federal government must make clear to Holtec and the town what can and cannot be done with contaminated wastewater immediately and provide enforceable barriers to such discharges. Lastly, these concerns are coming when the town can least afford to address them. While nuclear plants were in operation, many contributed significantly to local tax base, and most made payments to their host communities, either in the form of property taxes or a payment in lieu of taxes. As the plants have closed, those sources of funding have dried up, but the expectations that local governments continue to secure these sites and plan for future land use around them and address concerns like those caused by the potential wastewater releases from Pilgrim remain. The federal government, which long ago promised these communities a secure, safe, end-of-life plan for nuclear power, owes it to these communities to cover these costs. We look forward to working with you to ensure that our concerns are properly addressed. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. Can you please email that to me so that we can have it intact for the minutes and for the website?
I already did.
All right, awesome.
I already
Thank you
did
so
it.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Dave? Dave is going to give us an update on the ongoing efforts over at Holtec. Oh, we're going to use the screen. Oh. I guess the other one didn't work, huh? So there's a screen on in the back of the room. You guys in the back want to come forward so that you can view this screen. Normally, we have it up on the big wall, but everybody okay? Sorry, I can't make it bigger. Can we make it full screen, though, Dave? No?
No, it's as large as I can make it.
Really? There's not a full screen? Yeah. He was over here.
He did the plus minus top there. You can zoom in.
Just in the future. You know what I mean?
Really from here.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Christine, for the K.
My name is Dave Noyes. I'm the compliance manager for HDI at the Pilgrim plant. This first slide is our waterfall chart. It shows the major swim lanes for activities that are currently ongoing at the plant. You can see that those activities are characterization, the dry cask fuel storage, reactor segmentation, demolition and dismantlement, waste management, and site storage. We're going to go through several of the ongoing activities at the plant and updates since the last presentation to NDCAP. Important for this slide is that the submission of the license termination plan scheduled for September of 2024 and partial site release scheduled for September of 2027 remain on track as part of our rapid decommissioning schedule. Okay, for ongoing demolition activities, you can see on the current slide that the upcoming demolition activities are demolition of the two-story Butler building. That's at the bottom of the picture. That was a fabrication shop that was used by our contractors on site. The abatement of that building for asbestos has been completed. Interior demolition is near complete, with structural demolition of the building scheduled to begin August 1st. The admin executive building, which was the primary office building when the plant was built, has received its radiological disposition survey. Its abatement for asbestos and window caulking is scheduled for August 8th through August 22nd, with structural demolition to occur the end of August and beginning of September. The third building for near-term demolition is the trash compaction facility. Its responsibility during plant function was separation of radiological waste prior to shipment. Within that trash compaction facility, we have verified that there are no more hazardous materials associated with that building. Interior demolition will take place at the end of August, with structural demolition of the masonry block building to occur in the beginning in September.
You want to just mention what that trash compaction thing was for?
It was for radiological materials that were being readied to be shipped out of the plant. As the plant was operated, everything from normal housekeeping trash or other radiological material removed parts needed to be segregated and evaluated for shipment to offsite disposal. And that, the majority of that took place at that trash compaction facility.
Thanks, Steve.
Does the DEP approve that it is actually clean?
Whoa. Sorry. I'm sorry. We can do that later, okay? Just hold on to your questions.
Also ongoing as part of demolition is removal of 6 of 8 underground storage tanks. These were all fuel oil, diesel oil storage tanks. There was one 1,000-gallon tank, one 3,000-gallon tank, 2 20,000-gallon tanks, and 2 25,000-gallon tanks. The larger of the tanks fed the station blackout diesel generator when the plant was operating, and the plant's emergency diesel generator. Those underground storage tanks have all been removed. We have backfilled all of the tank excavations and are completing the final grading on the emergency diesel generators, which are the ones that are in blue. The oversight for removal of the tanks were provided by an on-site licensed site professional and also the Plymouth Fire Department.
And there was no leaking in the ground from a 25,000-gallon?
That's correct. There was no identified leakage on any of the 6 tanks that were removed.
Okay, just asking.
Who ascertained that?
The on-site professional.
The on-site?
The LSP.
Yes, a licensed site professional with the state of Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Okay, from the state of Massachusetts.
This is a picture of the demolition of one of the 20,000-gallon tanks. This one was one of the tanks for the station blackout diesel generator, with the tank excavation on the left-hand side and the removed tank shown in the upper right-hand picture.
Wow.
So for a demolition status, we had been reporting greater than 50% of outbuilding square footage having been demolished down to grade. That remains the case. The 3 buildings that I discussed earlier, the trash compaction facility, the 2-story Butler building, and the old administration building are highlighted in blue here, and they are scheduled to be removed prior to the end of the year. The red indicates buildings and structures that have already been removed down to grade level. Also ongoing at the plant is removal of the spent fuel pool racks. So there were racks within the spent fuel pool that housed at different times new fuel to be loaded into the reactor and spent fuel prior to its storage location or movement to casks. There were 14 spent fuel pool racks. 13 of the 14 have been removed from the pool for shipment. The one remaining is scheduled to be removed tomorrow. 9 of the 13 that have been removed from the pool to date have been shipped from the site for disposal in the WCS facility in Texas. The remainder are scheduled to be shipped the first week in August.
And those are truck to rail or something, or?
Those are truck. Those are direct via truck. So this shows a picture of a spent fuel pool rack being raised from the spent fuel pool and then being loaded into its containment bag prior to it being loaded into its shipping container prior to transport. For site characterization, ongoing radiological characterization activities are set up for concrete characterization for all of the buildings that we've removed down to slab. We're performing setup for being able to characterize the remaining concrete slabs that exist, and also sampling below-grade material during the storage tank removals to give us a indication of radiological material that could exist in those tank areas. This is not the final status survey for the removal of these tanks. Several have structures up gradient in groundwater for these particular tanks, and the final sampling and characterization cannot be done until the up gradient activities are performed. It was important for us to reduce the risk associated with underground storage tanks that were no longer in use, so we accelerated those activities. From a non-radiological characterization standpoint, we have amended our Phase 1 Alpha and Phase 2 MCP report with more accurate sampling and analysis methods. And the results of that have resulted in, of the 3 non-industrial areas, Para 1, Para 2, and Para 3. Para 1 and Para 2 are without Massachusetts contingency plan reporting criteria sampling results. The one area that is outside of the industrial area that had reportable conditions were the presence of PCBs and a substance called PFAS in our Para 3 area. And our LSP will discuss PFAS a little bit later on.
Where is this data? The data from the analyses?
It was reported to the state. So it's in the state reporting system.
Seth will talk about it.
Okay.
Not yet. We're going to take public afterwards. Sorry.
Under the state agreement, we have completed the removal of select portions of the leaching pits of our wastewater treatment facility and perform plantings in accordance with the Mass State Agreement. So those plantings have been installed and they are established.
Are you watering them with the wastewater?
We are not. We continue to aggressively pursue removal of waste from the site as it's generated. So to date in 2022, we've removed 50,000 cubic feet of Class A waste, which is the lowest of the 3 classes of radioactive waste. You can see the types of shipments that have been performed, including the spent fuel pool racks that we discussed earlier. We've also shipped filters that were used for maintaining the spent fuel pool clean during activities that were being performed in the pool in the reactor cavity. But our goal is to remove the material from the site as it's generated and not be a waste storage site.
Is that bottom one, is that bottom right one, do you put several of those racks in a truck?
The bottom right one is not a spent fuel pool rack.
Okay.
I'm not sure
All right, sorry.
what container that is, but I can find out and get back to you.
It's all right. I was just trying to figure out, if you can bundle the racks or if they're one at a time by truck.
The racks are one at a time.
Okay, thanks.
All right, this is a presentation on Pilgrim water origins and basic operational water quality. I will reiterate, independent of what the senator said earlier, I'm not sure how she would know that a decision had been made at the site to steamroll ahead and discharge 1.1 million gallons into the bay. I can tell you factually that is not the case. No decision has been made to do that. As discussed in previous meetings, we're in the process of analyzing all available options for the future of the water volumes, including the 4 options that are on the table. And part of that is recognition of the fact that we are still using the water for activities that are occurring within the spent fuel pool, the dryer separator pit, and the reactor cavity. Final decisions can't really be made until we determine the final quality of that water with respect to NEPD's permits and radiological requirements. Excuse me. It's important to understand where the water that is currently stored at the plant came from. The water ultimately began as Plymouth City water. That water had to be demineralized in order to be able to support plant operations. What these are some basic water quality standards that are used fairly universally across chemistry applications to be able to assess the relative quality of water. This does not directly equate to the requirements of the NEPD's permit, nor does it have any information regarding the radiological content of the water. All that information will be provided at future presentations. But for right now, thought it was important to be able to provide you with information regarding the water quality and where it came from. So Plymouth Water, and there were 2 sources of our information regarding Plymouth Water. One of them is our analysis of that water from our city water connections. The other one is the Town of Plymouth 2021 Water Quality Report that's available online. And you can see from the difference in the numbers that the water had to be filtered and demineralized in order to support reactor operation. In fact, one of the items, chlorides, which is at 220,000 parts per billion in Plymouth water, would have been at 220 times the limit that we would have been allowed to operate the plant. So if the water had exceeded 1,000 parts per billion, we would have had to shut the plant down until we could have resolved the water quality issues. So it was important that we maintain water at an extremely high quality level when the plant was operating. That's because in a boiling water reactor, steam is generated, but any impurities will result in plating out on reactor fuel. And impurities that plate out on the fuel could result in fuel failure, which would result in radiological releases. It would result in frequent shutdowns in order to replace fuel that became defective. So we had to maintain water at an extremely high quality level. That demineralized water was then used to make up to the plant's condensate storage tanks. The condensate storage tanks are important because they provided makeup to the spent fuel pool. So if you wanted to know the initial water quality of the spent fuel pool, the best indicator for that is the water quality of our condensate storage tanks. It also provided the volume that we used to flood up the reactor cavity and dryer separator pit prior to a refueling outage. So it provided the water quality, or provides a water quality indication of the water that was used to fill those 2 tank volumes at every shutdown of the plant, including the one that occurred in 2019, which was the final shutdown of the plant, and it's the water that currently exists within the dryer separator pit and the reactor cavity currently.
As far as the condensate, when was the last time the sludge was cleaned?
The condensate storage tanks?
Yes.
The tanks are empty. They're not currently being used.
I know that, but the question was, is all the sludge gone? Or is all what was on the base collected on the base over the years?
There may be some that's residual, but it will not impact water quality because it will be removed when the tanks are demolished. It will never see the plant process water
But
again,
it
anything that's
could
in those
have
tanks.
when the water continued. Well, it's for the next.
So then the water from the condensate storage tanks was used as makeup to support the reactor steam cycle. And that water, after it exited the main condenser in the hot well of the plant, was again further demineralized in order to ensure that the water, particularly sodium and chlorides, were an acceptable level for plant operation. So during plant operation, any water that was used from systems that were drained or leaks that occurred, that water was collected and retained and processed in our RAD liquid waste system, shown on the lower right-hand corner. That water went through a filtration and demineralization process and was used to fill treated water tanks. Those treated water tanks were used to provide makeup as part of the closed water cycle to the condensate storage tanks. But the treated water tanks would also be the potential discharge point of any radiological water that was discharged during the 40 years of plant operation. Now for...
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Sure.
You're going to give me a high-quality view of this presentation?
Yes.
I'm going to post it on the state website. You're going to be able to go in and look at it really closely. Everybody doesn't have to pay.
Please make sure your microphone is turned on.
I apologize, yes. Holtec is going to provide us with a high-quality presentation that we are going to post to the NDCAP website that is operated by the state so that you will all be able to access it probably within a few days. Okay. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, so for, with respect to the current water quality on site, these are the most recent sample analyses of the water that currently exists in the dryer separator pit and reactor cavity. That's on the left-hand side of the drawing. The spent fuel pool on the right-hand side of the drawing, excuse me, and the torus, which is a large cylindrical structure at the base of the plant. During operation, the torus was used for pressure suppression in the event of a streamline break within primary containment. But it is it's a surge volume for available water storage, and ultimately has a capability of being able to store 1.3 million gallons if necessary. You can see from the picture, excuse me, that at each location where the water is currently in use, to provide shielding and a medium for us to be able to continue removal of material within the spent fuel pool or dryer separator pit. We use localized filtration systems. Those localized filters are on the order of about 500 gallons per minute. The hoses directly pull from areas where metal is cut or loose material may be developed. And then those filter elements are closely monitored. And when they become plugged with material, they're removed from the plant. And then they're sent off-site as radiological, as solid waste. So we are continually using both temporary systems and installed systems like the spent fuel pool cooling and cleanup system to maintain a high degree of water quality that supports the activities that are ongoing. It's important to point out that the numbers that are on this sheet, the water quality that currently exists in the dryer separator pit reactor cavity, the spent fuel pool, and the torus would not be representative of the water that would be a candidate for potential discharge. And the reason for that is that the water would go through filtration and demineralization process prior to any discharge, which would significantly improve its water quality.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. If the decision is made to store the water in the torus, would it be stored after it was filtered, or would these numbers be relevant if there were concern of a crack or what have you in the base mat that would allow leakage into the groundwater and eventually into the bay?
Our current plan is to filter the water that exists in the Taurus. If you look at the water quality, it is lower quality than the water that currently exists in either the dryer separator pit or the spent fuel pool.
That really wasn't the question.
Well, I understand, I'm getting
Yeah.
to it.
Oh, okay.
So that gives us the ability to be able to establish a filtration system to bring that water quality in line with the water quality that exists in the dryer separator pit and the spent fuel pool. So to answer your question directly, the water that is currently in the dryer separator pit or spent fuel pool that may be a candidate to be drained to the Taurus would be on par with the quality of either the dryer separator pit or the spent fuel pool. And then that water would be demineralized and purified prior to its final disposition.
But Dave, you haven't decided to put it in the Taurus, right?
That's right.
Thank you.
That's right. The options for the potential paths for the water, the 4 options are still on the table. We still have a timetable to brief the NDCAP by either the end of the 3rd quarter or early in the 4th quarter as to what our potential decisions would be. The wild card in that was the request from Senator Markey's office to engage with a third-party individual that would independently review the water that is a potential for discharge and review our assessment of what its impact would be on marine life. So any decisions would be part of that timetable and part of that process.
Wouldn't it also be a wild card that if you discharged, it would be against both federal and state laws? That sounds like a big one.
Thank you, Mary. You'd have to explain what it means to be a wild card. I don't understand what a wild card in the context that I had. It was a variable in the decision making. I don't.
Then I think I should have said Trump's.
Don't, hey.
The station would not pursue discharge of water in violation of either any state or federal requirement.
Thank you. Did you finish that?
There is one more slide, but
Okay.
unfortunately, I'm unable to be able to bring it up on the screen. And it is a conclusionary slide that shows the quality of water with respect to Plymouth water. It directly compares information that's provided on the earlier screens.
This one?
Yes, that's the one.
You want it?
I have it, I just can't get it up on the screen.
Oh, okay. All right, but you can talk to it now, and we'll have it in the presentation that we post,
Yeah,
okay?
So the information is in the earlier 2 slides. A treated water tank's quality does compare very favorably compared to the water, the Plymouth town water, through the indicators of normal water quality. Again, these are just general indicators of water quality, but it's part of the assessment that the plant is going through now in order to determine what the final disposition of the water will be.
Thank you. Let's see, where am I at? I think we're going to hold the questions until after the state speaks. Let the IWG respond, then we're going to have the panel ask all the comments. Then we're going to talk about the PFAS, ERM and the PFAS, the panel and the public, okay? Can you just
May I make a request that after the panel asks questions, that in courtesy of the number of people in the room and the number standing, that we move up public and then do PFAS after, because I think while they are here, they are here because of concerns on potential discharge. I don't think they're here because of PFAS.
Oh, because you don't care about the PFAS going to the bay?
I care about
Okay,
PFAS, but
cool.
I think they
All
have a
right, no, I
major
get it.
concern.
Hear about these children here in the water, so we would rather have that first.
I'm sorry, what?
Thank you.
Children are sitting down. What's-
So I make a motion that we do that.
I second that motion.
I don't think we need honestly, we don't need a motion since it was one of your committee members that wanted the PFAS. You're stepping on her, not me. So have it your way, and maybe you want to just take over the meeting, Mary?
No.
Oh, okay, okay.
Are you serious?
Yes, I am.
I think, Seth, you're next. You're next, Seth.
My name is Seth Pickering. I represent EOEEA here on the NDCAP. I'm going to give an update on our interagency work group, which is a combination of a number of different state agencies. And then, Mrs. Lampert and Henrietta, I am going to read your questions that you sent to me and provide answers to the best of my ability, okay?
Thank you, that's lovely.
So I'll start with the update. On the site assessment work plan, which is the ESA, Mass DEP and DPH, along with the AGO, are continuing to review Holtec's responses to the formal comments that were provided by the state initially back in January of this year. The ESA work plan must be approved by the state under the settlement agreement reached with the Commonwealth. We are working on aspects of that continually between things like the demolition of buildings that are ongoing, asbestos, solid waste issues, water pollution control issues, waste site cleanup issues that I'm going to talk about later. So even though that plan has not been formally approved yet, we are working on aspects of that plan. Mass DEP, the Department of Health, MEMA, and the Attorney General's Office are also continuing to review Holtec's radioactive waste management plan, which was submitted in response to the AGO's noncompliance letter back in November of '21. That has been submitted, so we will be continue to review that and approve that if it's approvable.
The noncompliance letter was for what?
They had not submitted the radioactive management work, waste management plan at that time, Pine. But we have it, it's under review. On the NIPD's permit and the state surface water discharge permit. As has been stated in prior meetings, US EPA and Mass DEP have not received a formal request by Holtec to discharge spent fuel cooling water into Cape Cod Bay. If a request were received, including sufficient analytical information to make a determination, EPA and Mass DEP would review that information and provide a determination to Holtec on the next necessary steps. Any new or amended MPDES permit would be subject to a federal consistency review by the Office of Coastal Zone Management. Also, based on prior statements by Holtec, we understand that the company currently has no plans to discharge any spent nuclear fuel pool water or other decommissioning water, wastewater, in 2022, and they will continue to review the issue. During a recent meeting with DPH and Mass DEP, the state has learned that Holtec has conducted initial sampling of spent fuel cooling water and other processed water stored on site. That was the subject of Mr. Noyes' presentation just a few minutes ago. Subsequently, Holtec has presented the sampling results to DPH and Mass DEP during a virtual meeting, just as Dave has here tonight. The state has expressed an interest in receiving the results of the sampling, but we have not received a response officially. The state continues to believe it's important for Holtec to conduct comprehensive initial sampling of the spent fuel cooling water and other stored wastewater on site to determine an initial baseline regarding pollutant profiles and concentrations of the stored wastewater. Due to ongoing activities at the site, additional sampling will be necessary in the future to reach a conclusion about the final characteristics of the water in the spent fuel pool and other wastewater that is stored on site. Mass DEP is also aware of a recent letter that was issued by EPA to Holtec on June 17th of 2022. Mass DEP's position is that Holtec must comply with the requirements of the MPDES and surface water discharge permit, which plainly prohibit the discharge of pollutants in spent nuclear fuel pool water and other decommissioning-related wastewater. According to preliminary sampling, the spent nuclear fuel pool water does include non-radiological pollutants. On other cleanup issues, we're going to shift to waste site cleanup, Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, applicable things at the plant. It's a little technical in content. If there are questions after I'm done with the update, John Handrahan, who is the Acting Deputy Regional Director for Mass DEP in the Southeast Region for the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, can answer any questions that people may have. On April 14th, 2022, Mass DEP received 120-day notifications for 4 different areas at the Pilgrim Station power plant site and associated properties. Several compounds were reported in laboratory data sheets as non-detect, but the reporting limit was above the applicable reportable concentration. After resampling, 2 of the notifications were retracted as compounds were not detected above the reportable concentration. The following contaminants were ultimately identified as exceeding reportable concentrations in soil and groundwater. PFAS, PFOA, PCB 1254, both of those exceeded what's called the RCS1 reportable concentration for soil. PFAS in the form of PFAS 6 exceeded reportable concentrations for groundwater. 3 additional compounds were detected in areas where Mass DEP is issuing notices of responsibility. It's the department's understanding that 1,4-dioxane, 1,2-dibromoethane, and silver were not actually detected in these samples. The laboratory method detection limits were higher than the reporting limits for that groundwater requirement, so these 3 compounds are being conservatively reported to Mass DEP. Additional assessment with appropriate method detection limits may result in these compounds no longer being considered contaminants of concern. Mass DEP issued notices of responsibility letters to Holtec on this past Thursday, July 21st, in relation to the exceedances above, the releases above. Holtec now has 1 year to complete appropriate response actions or could choose to include these additional notifications into the ongoing comprehensive response actions that are currently ongoing in relation to prior notifications received in April of 2021. Mass DEP notes that the PFAS 6 detection was upgradient of the power plant site. As has been previously reported, Holtec has tiered classified the site due to the prior identification and notice of releases of metals and PFAS substances to groundwater, and thus moved to the comprehensive site assessment phase under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or MCP. Holtec must now begin comprehensive response actions under the MCP until a permanent solution is achieved, which is defined by the Commonwealth Settlement Agreement with Holtec to mean a permanent solution with no conditions. On other cleanup items, DEP's asbestos section continues to be actively engaged in overseeing the demolition activity occurring at the site and is meeting regularly with the company to manage the asbestos discovery, identification, abatement, and removal process. So I'm going to make John Handrahan available if anybody has any questions on the waste site cleanup. Technical info is that okay, Madam Chair? Sure, yep.
My question is you just looked at non-radioactive, something like PCB and all that stuff, right?
Please ask any questions up at the microphone.
Oh.
Or you can, and I can repeat them.
Sure. And
So, short, so that, not short your question, just in short.
okay, so the ultimate.
Or come up to the mic if you want, sure.
Might be easier for you.
Whatever you'd like.
My question is that the non-radioactive that you were, like PCB and all that, the upshot, was it not cleared or cleared of EPA standards?
So I'll let John answer that.
Several of the,
Yep, you can speak in, yep.
sure. John Handrahan, Mass DEP. Several of the areas that they went back and retested, they did not detect the contaminants.
Please speak into the microphone.
Never thought you'd hear that, did you, John?
Several of the areas they went back and tested, and they did not detect the contaminants that they conservatively reported to us once their laboratory detection limits were set properly. So several areas have been ruled out as needing additional assessment under those notifications. Other areas, they still have acknowledged to us that they've got some more work and more looking to do in those areas.
I'm sorry, who had more looking to look?
Holtec,
Holtec.
yeah.
So before they presented to you?
So they have notified us. So how the program works is they notified the department that a reportable concentration has been identified, and then they work with their environmental team to assess and, if necessary, remediate that, those compounds that were identified. What the department does is review the work that they are doing. So that's how our program works. They take the lead, they make the day-to-day decisions on what to sample, how to sample, when to sample, and then we review that material, review that data after the fact.
So you reviewed data on the compounds, is that public information?
Yep.
And the amounts?
Yep. So all the notifications and all the reports that Holtec has made to the department on behalf of the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, the MCP, that's all available on our eDEP website. So you can look up all of their, we call them release tracking numbers. They're basically file numbers. So you can look up all that information, and all the same information they've reported to us is there.
And
So-
John is going to give us a link to that, so there would be a link on our website to that information.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Certainly.
Are we supposed to ask questions?
Can Seth finish first? Can you finish your presentation, or are you done?
Well, I'm going to go, next, I've got just a little bit left on the MEMA update, and
Is that okay, Henrietta?
then I'm going to go into the questions that Mary and Henrietta have asked.
Okay.
Do you want to go, you want to ask your question now? Is it on the way?
I think you should finish up, Seth.
No, you go.
Okay.
They'll remember what they have.
Okay. Public safety MEMA. MEMA continues to work with local partners on public safety planning. Quarterly meetings of the Pilgrim Working Group involve the licensee and the former planning zone, emergency planning zone. Communities are ongoing and focus on updates of the decommissioning process. MEMA is continuing to review NRC's proposed amendments to regulations related to decommissioning and is inviting public comments by August 30 of 2022. MEMA and the Attorney General's office are reviewing the proposed amendments. And so that was emphasized, I believe, at the hearing.
But that doesn't, that comment period is something useful to the rest of the country about decommissioning, but won't affect how Pilgrim is decommissioned, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, you know what, I can't answer that, but if
I can-
Mary knows the
so
answer.
that's, I know the answer too. So
Okay.
That's what it is. So the NRC, it will help the NRC and the rest of the country, for people that are coming after us, to.
So it's the new rule.
It's the new rule.
It is
Yeah,
not a
okay.
backfit.
Okay.
So if you can, comment, but don't think it's going to change
Yeah, I would recommend that
anything here.
people comment. Okay, so I'm going to address Mary's questions first. Mary provided me with 9 questions and change. First one, do DEP and EOEA agree with what EPA says in the June 17th, 2022 letter from EPA to Holtec? If there are any aspects of the letter with which the Commonwealth does not agree, what are they and what is the basis of any such disagreement? The answer is Mass DEP agrees with EPA's position that Holtec is not authorized under the current NPDES permit to discharge pollutants in spent nuclear fuel pool water. Good? That's the answer.
That letter is also on our website, you guys.
Second question, what actions has EPA or DEP taken with respect to the apparently accidental discharge of pollutants from a Pilgrim electrical vault? I believe that was the unauthorized discharge of the NPDES permit. Yep. For example, has any fine been levied? What has been done to reduce the likelihood of any similar unauthorized discharges in the future? The answer is that there has been no enforcement action taken by Mass DEP. And that's an EPA permit as well. I can't comment on them. Well, I can't discuss anything that may be deliberative or that could be enforcement.
Really? You don't know regulations, girls and boys? I think.
Well, that's my answer, and so that's it. I can't discuss it.
Okay.
Well, that's a different question.
He didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
He didn't say that, though, Diane.
Yeah, I didn't say that.
Yeah.
So third question is, does DEP or EOEA itself or working with the AG have the authority to bring suit to prevent threatened violation of a permit, particularly a NPDES permit? Has the Commonwealth ever exercised any such authority? Under what conditions would it do so? And so, Mary, this comes right from the AGO. Based on the advice from the Attorney General's office, we are unable to answer this question because doing so could divulge sensitive legal and strategic decisions and rationales.
Okay.
Fourth question, does DEP or EOEA itself or working with the AG have the authority to bring suit to prevent threatened violations of the Massachusetts Ocean Sanctuaries Act or its associated regulations, 301 CMR? Has the Commonwealth ever exercised such authority? Under what conditions would it do so? So the answer is the same as the previous question, Mary.
Okay.
So based on advice from AGO, I can't discuss it at this time.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I don't mean to interrupt, but you listed off so many acronyms. Could you say the full, who you are?
Sure. Yep. You bet. Anyone's in particular that?
The AGO, all of them. She doesn't.
AGO is the Attorney General's office. Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
And they're the agency under the governor. There's a cabinet. The secretary is part of the cabinet of the governor. Energy and Environmental Affairs covers DEP and a bunch of other agencies. So he's within that office.
Question 5, more specifically, what actions could the Commonwealth take if Holtec says that it will discharge, parentheses, not merely that it is still evaluating its options, parentheses, closed, pollutants as defined in the Clean Water Act, or commercial or industrial waste as provided in MGL, Massachusetts General Law, 132A and 301 CMR, which is Code of Massachusetts Regulations, into Cape Cod Bay. Could it bring suit to enjoin such a charge as opposed to only imposing a fine or seeking damages after the fact? And then another question, has the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. So The answer to that is the same, Mary.
My answer is that's why there's an NDCAP and why you guys are here. Because it's going to be very hard for the AG to do that and be successful.
On what basis?
Because it takes too long.
A preliminary injunction can stop it before. And a preliminary injunction does not take long, and being the state, they would not have to post a bond. That's the name of the game.
I ain't going to argue with the lawyer family,
I'm not a lawyer, so.
you know.
So here's the sixth question. Has the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, or DEP, discussed this with the Office of the Attorney General? And the answer is, so if you're referring to discussions about the discharge of spent nuclear fuel pool water into Cape Cod Bay, the answer is yes, it's been discussed. But beyond that, based on advice from the Attorney General's office, I can't discuss it at this time. I'm going to paraphrase your next question, Mary. It goes to the status of the ESA, the Environmental Site Assessment. And so it's still under review, and that's on me. And I will do everything I can to get those most recent updates and response to comments from Holtec put together, and we'll try to see if that thing's approvable or not.
What's that deadline there, Seth?
Soon.
What's soon, Seth?
Well,
No, I mean, you know, a week or two, or is it a month or
no,
two?
I wouldn't say it's a week or two, but, if you haven't heard anything in 3 to 4 weeks, you can give me a yell.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay. I know where to find you, just so
you
know.
sure do. Let's see. So, reading the attachments to the NPDES permit, that is the National Elimination.
Pollution, discharge elimination.
I'm sorry, it's spelled wrong here. It's NPDES. It's National Pollution Elimination. I'm sorry. It's National Pollution
Discharge Elimination
System. My bad. I'm going to cross this out because it's not the right acronym. Boron is not naturally radioactive. This is your statement, Mary, but it can be made radioactive with a quite short half-life. Pilgrim's current permit says that the discharge of spent fuel pool water is not allowed and specifically refers to boron. What's the story if at least some of the boron is radioactive? Is boron still a prohibited pollutant? And if this makes any difference, who bears the burden proving that it is? This same question would apply to anything that is a pollutant as defined in the permit, but that could become radioactive. And then it says monitoring 1 million gallons water under discussion to discharge into Cape Cod Bay. So the answer is that Holtec must comply with requirements of the NPDES and surface water discharge permit, which plainly prohibit the discharge of pollutants in spent nuclear fuel pool water and other decommissioning-related wastewater. According to preliminary sampling, the spent nuclear fuel pool water does include non-radiological pollutants.
Okay, but still, what happens to, if a portion of whatever the pollutants that are listed in the permit not to be released have become activated?
Radioactive?
Yeah.
So I'm going to pass that one along to Mr. Priest. Do you have any comment on the radioactivity? That's Jack's thing.
So one, boron's got a half-life of a couple hundred milliseconds, I believe, so we don't expect to see radioactive boron. If there are other radionuclides present, those are under the regulatory authority of the US EPA and the US NRC, and they have to be a small, and historically have been a small fraction of the effluent concentration limits. The NPDES permit does not define contaminants as radioactive.
So in what world will those activated elements be dealt with?
They fall under the regulatory authority of the NDCAP.
What about the regulatory authority of the state?
The state does not have regulatory authority for radioactive constituents in the water.
From nuclear power plants, right? Isn't it?
Wrong. That's incorrect. I'm sorry.
Just let me, can you clarify, please? Go ahead, Jack.
So what does Mrs. Lampert disagree with?
A lot of people here disagree.
We all.
What I disagree with is that this Cape Cod Bay is a protected ocean sanctuary, and pollutants, whether they be radioactive, cannot be discharged. And that's a state law.
The discussion was about the NPDES, and by definition, radioactive material is not a contaminant per the US EPA. Radioactive material is allowed to be released in effluents below concentration limits as defined by the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Not in our bay.
No.
Yeah, buddy.
Speak.
I didn't say I agree with that. I am explaining to you what the regulatory basis is for effluent concentration limits. Falls under 10 CFR 20, Code of Federal Regulations 1301.
Can I ask a question?
Ask him if he lives here.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. Jack, sorry, can you repeat the citation?
I believe it's 10 CFR 20, 1301.
Thank you.
And I'll validate with you the minutes.
Okay, thanks. Are you getting there?
I am.
Okay.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second and ask him a question what he just said? Are you saying the NRC regulations trump any regulations?
There is no regulation
So,
in Massachusetts.
the panel members, the panel members that are online can't hear people that are yelling from the audience.
Right, and I'd
So
like to ask you.
I'd ask the chairperson to let Seth finish his presentation.
That's what I was trying to do, Jack.
Members of the public have questions, they can come up to the podium and we'll be happy to answer them.
Right. So, will you, Seth?
Good? Okay. Yeah, we'll get to people's questions. There was talk at Senator Markey's hearing and correspondence from Dr. Singh to Senator Markey since about sampling and testing the Pilgrim water. Dr. Singh said he would let Senator Markey's expert come to Pilgrim and look at Pilgrim's records, but hasn't agreed to anything else that we know about. Last week, Patrick O'Brien told us that Holtec would welcome the state taking samples if they see fit at any point if they want, but to date they have not requested that at this time. So here's the first question, that's a statement. So what progress has there been on who will do what and when a protocol, et cetera? So the answer to that is that it's very similar to what I said about the status of where the department is on whether or not the discharge is allowed or not by the permit, which it's not. So we learned recently that Holtec conducted initial sampling of the spent fuel pool cooling water and other process water that's stored on site. Holtec presented the sampling results to DPH and Mass DEP in a virtual meeting. State expressed an interest in receiving the results, but we haven't got any official results yet. We continue to believe it's important for Holtec to conduct comprehensive initial sampling of the spent fuel pool cooling water and the other stored wastewater on site to determine initial baseline regarding pollutant profiles and concentrations of the stored wastewater. So, again, Mass DEP is aware of the recent letter that was issued by EPA, and Mass DEP's position is that Holtec must comply with the requirements of the NIPIs and the surface water discharge permit, which prohibit the discharge of pollutants in spent nuclear fuel pool water and other decommissioning-related wastewater into the bay. And according to preliminary sampling, the spent nuclear fuel pool water does include non-radiological pollutants.
And for background, neither DEP nor DPH feel it is necessary to take any of their own samples at present, where Pat O'Brien said if the state wanted to, they could. So
I'm not prepared to comment on that right
Okay.
now. I can tell you that there's no, there's nothing in the permit, and there's nothing in regulation that would give us that authority.
But if
Right now.
Holtec agreed, would
Well,
you
we're-
not,
we're-
if Holtec agreed that you could, based on the public or the NDCAP's request, there's no reason why you wouldn't?
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
That's an important distinction.
Yeah, we're not saying we wouldn't do it, but, it's like anything else, right? Everybody gets their due process, and you got to stay within the regulations and the statutes.
Henrietta is first.
I got a couple, I just have a couple more from Mary, and then Henrietta's as well. So, we feel strongly that the water should be tested now, so we're kind of getting to your, among other things, EPA clearly needs to know what's in the water properly mixed, so all the junk isn't at the bottom, so we can intelligently respond. If Holtec continues on its present, we're allowed to discharge route or tries to get its current permit changed. The answer is Holtec has conducted initial sampling of water and described those results to EPA, so they have done that. So the next one is a hypothetical. If Holtec goes ahead with discharging with or without EPA agreement on a permit discharge, it also seems clear that you need to sample each batch immediately before and during discharge. Do you agree? The answer is without final pollutant concentration data, it is too early to say what sampling would be appropriate and necessary. And we repeat that discharging the spent fuel pool water now would violate Holtec's NIPD's and surface water discharge permits.
Right.
This is
I
your,
believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't EPA say they would need a new NIPD's permit to do that?
that's what the June 17th letter said.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And
we agree with that.
The word on the vine is that the NRC and the EPA are going to get together and duke it out pretty soon. Is that right?
That I cannot,
Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to be on the wall, I'll tell you.
And if they did,
I'm a pacifist. I
If they
don't want to
did-
see anybody duking it out.
I used to be a pacifist.
if they did discharge, is it correct that the maximum fine is $150,000?
I have no idea.
Let's get into it, don't get ahead of it, though.
Well, when you
Please.
consider how much it costs to ship,
Don't get ahead of it.
Yeah, no, I can't answer that, Mary.
They'll lose every decommissioning.
Last one of Mary's, our level of trust in Holtec falls far short of allowing us or the state to rely on Holtec's testing. A former president said, trust but verify. Do you have any reason to go even that far? The answer is it's unclear exactly what you're asking with this question, but we agree that verification is important, which is why we
that
have
the
the
AG?
ability to ask for split samples if desired.
Was that the AG that was replying?
That's a collective answer from the IWG.
Boy, that must have been fun to get to. Henrietta. I think you had a question.
Yeah, could I just make a comment first on your answers to Mary?
Sure.
I'm just I'm still stunned that MassDEP does not seem to have any plans, if I understand you correctly, to do independent sampling of its own. And which brings me back to Ronald Reagan and trust but verify. Trust but verify. We have no basis to trust Holtec samples.
Reagan,
There is no way to know where they got the water from. Did they go to the top or did they go to the bottom of the tank? Did they go to the tap? I mean, how do we know? I would like to believe them, and yet in the business world, you'd be an idiot to give all your trust. Well, let's talk about farms. You don't leave the hen house in charge of the fox. So it just seems like common sense. Common, ordinary sense. Everybody in this room would agree with this. And so I simply do not
And
understand.
Henrietta, everybody in the room should know that they don't know what they're doing now. So let's not decide, let's not.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, you don't, they have an LSP. Do you know, LSP is licensed site professional. A licensed site professional is someone who is licensed by the state who could lose their license as well as a bunch of other stuff if they don't comply with following regulations on how you do things according to the Hoyle, the Bible of LSPs. You know, they have to do it that way. We have to trust someone, okay? If you have a hired LSP by a company that wants to decommission the nuclear fleet in this country, you have to believe that they know more than you do. That doesn't mean, wait a second, wait a second. That doesn't mean you don't ask the question. What I'm saying is you don't assume that they're trying to lie. And that's what it feels to me. And I'm on your side. We started this fight to try to close the plant down. We're on your side. But I don't think we know anything more than we knew in November when we started this discussion. And until we get more information, we should try and get as much information as we can. And I agree with the questions. Let's find out. Let's let Dave answer. Better yet, let's let ERM answer, and the lab guys tell us how they're doing the sampling. But don't assume that we should hate them. Don't assume that.
And don't put words in our mouth, Pine, either, please.
I think the point of the questions, Pine, was that there is an interest in the state verifying and knowing when they intend to verify and what the results of that verification would be. That is not saying that we think Holtec are liars. I don't know whether they are or they aren't, and that's not the point. I would like to have our state do the job that I, and I think many of these people feel, would be the best protection of the environment and of the health, and to provide that assurance.
Yes.
We would like, it's perception too that's important.
And
And I
Thank you,
think
Mary.
that's exactly what Senator Markey was asking for. And Jim is going to come up and tell us, maybe in September, how we're going to go about doing that, if it's possible from their point of view. Because having an idea is different than being able to execute it. I don't know if everybody's
Excuse me.
realized that yet, but
I have another question, and this is just a point of information. Did you mean to suggest that it's the licensed site inspector who's doing the sampling? Because I didn't pick that up. Maybe that's the case, but that's not what I heard.
No, not for the wastewater, not for the,
Because we are talking about water here. I am,
Yeah.
anyway. So the licensed
you're
site...
telling me that the licensed site professional is not doing the sampling? Some 18-year-old kid is going in
I'm
there and
not
doing
saying
the
it's an
sampling? Give me a
18-year-old,
break.
but Dave would be the one that could tell us.
It's a qualified chemistry technician that works for Holtec, works for HDI.
Works for Holtec, right.
Now,
Precisely.
now that doesn't mean that individual is gets to decide how he operates in accordance with procedures. He's regulated. The NRC monitors the performance of individuals performing activities in accordance with procedures. If
My
the public,
question was about the
If the public would
state.
feel
Okay.
better with split samples, we will fully make split samples available. Now, the important thing to remember is that the quality of the water that exists in the spent fuel pool now is not representative of the water that could potentially be discharged. It's just not.
Just ship it to New Mexico, would you please, and tank the trucks?
It's gonna be,
Cost you more money.
Stop it, Go ahead.
the water would be filtered and demineralized consistent with the standards that we saw on the piece of paper.
But-
We have every reason to believe that we can provide water that does not contain primary pollutants. We have not discharged anything since 2015, which was 4 years before we made a decision to shut the plant down.
That was November.
7,500 gallons, you're talking from the vault, and it was an
radiological
accident.
water. That was an underground cable vault in a clean area with no radiological constituents associated with it.
And it was an error of the electrical guys on site. It wasn't an intentional discharge to get around anything. And
the
that's
water-
why,
And the quality of that water was provided at an
Yeah.
NDCAP meeting.
take a look at your septic system.
We showed in NDCAP meeting that the quality of that water was consistent with drinking water standards, with clean water ocean standards, with the exception of 2 elements, copper and zinc.
I really wanted to get back to the state authority, though. That's what my question was about. So I would like to understand, yes or no, does the MassDEP have any plans to oversee the taking of samples and then to test the samples that have been taken under oversight?
So not currently, but I'm going to tell you that the same thing I've been telling you. The facility is going to need to comply with the permit. Now, Mary, to go to your, ask your question about what the regulatory authority is, or we can circle back and you can identify what it is you think that we should be able to do as DEP. It's going to have to be something that is based in statute and regulation. What you're asking for, best of my knowledge, does not exist in statute and regulation.
My lawyer is ready to speak.
Well, like I said, we can work on that,
Yeah,
but
Katie's
I'm
right
not
behind
prepared to answer that. I'm not prepared to answer anything that goes to the regulatory authority for your last ask. So please respect that. We will work on trying to get you an answer, or see if there's some way, but that's the answer.
Okay, thank you.
And Seth, is there anything in the settlement agreement that would go to this topic?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thanks.
So last one, Henrietta, you want me to do your question, or are you good?
Well, I think in a way you've already done it.
Okay.
You've done it in. I really wanted to know if the state, via DEP, was planning to do before samples of the water independently of Holtec, and before it is then filtered and demagnetized, or whatever the term was. And then again, when it's been filtered, magnetized.
Yeah. So I would have to go back to what was in my initial statement about the NIPD's permit, and the fact that before the facility could discharge, right, they need to make a request. It's got to include sufficient analytical information to make a determination by EPA and Mass DEP that we would review and provide determination to Holtec on next necessary steps, and any new or amended NIPD's permit would be subject to federal consistency review.
Yeah, but that's, again, relying on what
But we're on
Holtec
the record
provides.
as saying that their current NIPD's and surface water discharge permit does not allow for the discharge of spent fuel
Yes.
pool water
Yes.
or decommissioning water.
And indeed, that is also
So,
pretty clear in the settlement agreement that Holtec has agreed to comply with Commonwealth regulations and with the marine sanctuary, all of that. It's all in the settlement agreement. So that would seem to suggest that the state has authority to verify, to oversee and verify those things. But the very fact that Holtec still not just has dumping on the table, but is uniquely planning to dump, even though, with apologies, Dave, I know you say you're still evaluating, but really, it's clear that leaving it in the torus is not realistic if the torus is cracked. It's clear that there isn't the wherewithal to evaporate, so that's not a realistic option. And Chris Singh himself, in his letter, second letter to Markey, said that Holtec had decided to remove the option of transporting because it was environmentally unjust, which is hilarious, but that's why I'm asking.
Just to straighten the record regarding the integrity of the torus is not cracked. The torus is a seismic Class 1 structure. It is not cracked. It was well maintained throughout the life of the plant. It is not cracked. It's not leaking. The torus would be an acceptable repository for that water.
The base mat, according to the MIT study, and it's all in the NRC report of 2007, the base mat had cracks and there were also potential leaks around the joints. And so my question is, it's now 2022. Has there been an inspection of the base mat, of the cracks? Cracks typically grow.
Yeah, we're not talking about the integrity of the torus. You're talking about the integrity of its supports in the surrounding concrete structure.
Yeah.
You're not talking about the integrity of the vessel that would hold the water.
Yes, correct.
I just want to be very clear about that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
I
you
feel
done?
I feel a presence behind me who would like to speak. Am I done?
We have a number, yeah. I'm looking for you to wrap it up, Seth.
Thank you.
All right. I did
What I
not,
would like to do is to clarify.
Yeah, as a panel member, I asked that he could clarify in response
in 30
to-
seconds. Go.
There has been a lot of discussion here on the NetDees permit versus state law. And as Jack and Seth have quite clearly told everyone here accurately, the NetDees permit does not deal with radioactive materials that may or may not be discharged. There was a statement also about state law and the protected ocean sanctuaries. And I'm reading from section 15 of that law that says, except as otherwise provided, and I haven't seen it otherwise provided, the dumping or discharge of commercial, municipal, domestic, or industrial wastes into a protected ocean sanctuary. And I guess that basically leads with the question, really today, I think you tried to answer these. You said that, if I heard you correctly, that Holtec would not violate any federal or state law. My question that I put to Dr. Singh, and I'm sure you've seen the question and hope to get a clear answer, and we may have gotten it, was, will Holtec agree that it will not release any of Pilgrim's waste into Cape Cod, Plymouth, Duxbury, or Kingston Bay, because those are clearly prohibited by the regulations with which, in the settlement agreement, you agreed to comply? Did I get a yes? Did I get a yes answer to that?
All right, Jim, all right.
So the direct answer to your question is no, we will not say that we will not discharge water into Plymouth Bay. All right, that is still an option that remains on the table.
Whose table?
Stop.
Am I also, am I correct or
He
not
didn't say he was
correct?
going to discharge dirty water into the bay. You guys discharge dirty water into the bay. Grow up. You guys discharge dirty water. These guys have water there that they're trying to analyze that originated from Plymouth that they clean and they want to discharge into the bay. They're not going to be allowed to do it if it damages the bay. That's the distinction we need to make.
Fine, that is not the distinction
That
the
is not.
statute makes.
That's
Excuse
not
me?
what the statute
That's
says.
not what the statute says.
I'm not talking about the statute. You guys are talking about the
Yeah,
statute.
fine.
I started with the fucking
So
statute.
frankly, I think maybe we should talk about the statute.
Well, I started talking
Because I
about
think
the
one of the real
statute
questions
20 years
here-
ago. Where were you guys?
Where was I when you were
that's
studying the
rude.
statutes? Probably practicing law.
Ridiculous.
Okay, Dave, one other question. May I ask one more question, please, Mr. Priest or Madam Chairman?
I'm trying. We
My
do-
one other question, it's also one I
No,
raised.
Jim, no. You
So-
said a point of clarification. You
He
got
is-
it.
is-
You were
he
there
is
for a minute and a
clarifying.
half, not 30
This
seconds.
He
is
is
a point of
clarifying.
clarification.
Your speech
of what
took up the
Dave
time.
Noyes said, or I understood him to say, they would not violate any federal law. My clarification would ask whether you will not discharge any spent fuel water, processed or not, until or unless the EPA has said that's permitted under your permit. Because it would violate federal law if it's not. That's the clarification I'm seeking.
We will evaluate the quality of the water. If it's consistent with the requirements of the permit, it will still be an option to discharge, without a final decision being made on that yet.
And that's taken into account that, EPA's most recent letter that said flatly, you cannot discharge any water, processed or not, from the spent fuel pool.
Containing pollutants.
That's not what, with pollutants, these are all pollutants.
All right. All right, I'm going to go with ERM right now. John Drabinski, are you still around?
Yes, I am. I'm right here.
Could you give us an update on the PFAS? There was a question that we received that I was trying to be responsive to about more clarification about the PFAS that was found on site. If you can deal with that, then we can go to the public questions and we can figure out how much longer we're going to address some of this.
Sure. Dave, can you let us know?
Sorry?
John,
John, let me see. Hang on a second.
Same way you did before. We can just get
Is PAC TV saying, there we go. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I'll try to be quick and concise. I'm going to talk about PFAS in general, the regulatory environment, and what we found at the site. So next slide, please. So PFAS are basically a family of organofluorochemical compounds. They're very resistant to breakdown, they migrate easy, they bioaccumulate, and basically they're found in sediments, soil, actually in some atmospheric deposition, so they're basically omnipresent in the environment. The uses and sources that basically range from consumer to industrial processes. You find them in coatings, plastics, upholstery, paper, pizza boxes, candy wrappers, popcorn bags, specifically in Teflon coating and pots and pans. If you saw the movie Dirty Water, you realize where it's coming from. And then more importantly, PFAS is from firefighting foams associated with military operations, large fires and airport operations. And the most common exposure to PFAS is through the ingestion of either public drinking water supply or private drinking water supply. And Mass DEP has a very aggressive program ongoing right now to look at PFAS throughout the environment. And in fact, the legislature just issued an interagency task force study on PFAS, and I recommend everyone take a look at it. It was issued in April of 2022. It has a lot of great information about PFAS in general and recommendations for protection of firefighters when they use their turnout gear. And also, Mass DEP has a great guidance document dated 2020 to deal with PFAS in general. So I can share that with the committee if you want. I'll send you the link to the hard copy if you want that.
John, can you slow down and reinitiate the company here about what PFAS is? It's a man-made chemical. This gentleman is John Drabinski. He works for ERM, which is Environmental Resource Management. They're a subcontractor of Holtec working on the site. Thank you, John. Go ahead.
I'm a geologist. My background is I've been involved in municipal government for more than 30 years. I'm a professional geologist and a licensed site professional. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a resident of Sudbury, Mass. So definitely familiar with all the issues we were just talking about previously. But back to PFAS, man-made compounds from the 40s, the ubiquitous environment. The main exposure to humans is through consumption of drinking water, but there are other potential exposures through fire protection processes, Teflon coating bands, and things like that. So they're ubiquitous in the environment. From a regulatory context, PFAS are considered hazardous material under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan because they do cause adverse health effects. And more importantly, PFAS in the environment are investigated and remediated under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, which has established a drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion, as well as reportable concentrations for PFAS. And if there's a release detected in the Commonwealth, which exceeds the reportable concentrations or reportable quantities that are on the right-hand side of this chart, then the investigation process begins. And as the gentleman from Mass DEP said earlier, that Holtec has received a number of release tracking notifications to proceed with the MCP process to address not only PFAS, but some metals and other organic compounds in both soil and groundwater. The groundwater site is classified GW1, which means it's situated over a sole source aquifer, indicating current and future use as a water supply. Currently, there are no drinking water withdrawals in the area. So, based on the geology, hydrogeology, the site is the most conservative for looking at cleanup standards in the Commonwealth, and that's what we're doing. Next slide, please. Oh, any questions? Sorry, any questions? Or we want to have questions at the end, Pine? How do you want to handle that?
I don't see any questions. You can keep going, John.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. And PFAS is at the site. There are approximately 35 groundwater monitoring wells at the site where we monitor groundwater quality. And on the industrial parcel, which includes the reactor, the turbine building, and all the accessory buildings, we found PFAS in only 2 wells, HA6 and MW201. In fact, there are approximately 35 wells on the site, and we've only found PFAS in 4 of the wells. On HA6, the PFAS level is 34 parts per trillion compared to the standard of 20 parts per trillion. At MW201, the PFAS level is 35 parts per trillion compared to the 20 parts per trillion. Over to the right is the perimeter area where we analyze soil and groundwater, as Mr. Hanrahan mentioned earlier, and we found PFAS at HA19 and HA20. We found PFAS concentrations there about 70 parts per trillion, which is, again, above the standard of 20 parts per trillion. And as Seth mentioned earlier, this is upgradient of the industrial portion. When you look at the site maps here, groundwater flows essentially to Cape Cod Bay, and that would be the groundwater flow direction. We're still in the process of measuring groundwater flow, but we'll identify that further. So going forward, the MCP requires that we do a number of things to address the PFAS. One, determine the nature and extent of the PFAS. And what does that mean? That means we have to figure out where it's going and where is it coming from. We have to figure out the fate and transport. And that means how does it travel through the environment? How does it travel through the soil? How does it travel through the groundwater? And where does it discharge to? And then based on that, we need to look at the risk. What is the risk to the environment? What is the risk to the human health? And based on all that, we come to hopefully closure where we look at, as the settlement agreement indicated that Seth mentioned earlier, we come to regulatory closure and MCP. So it's a very strict process that we have to go through. And the licensed site professional is licensed by the Commonwealth to conduct an independent, open, and transparent analysis of what's going on the site. And we present the data to DEP, who to look at it, review it, and then either concur or not concur with the final solution. And as you know, the settlement agreement spells out very clearly the process that we have to go through. So I know I went quick because I know people want to get out of there, but I'll open up any questions. The PFAS, little side, but PFAS levels here are quite low when you look at other properties that have PFAS in it. So we're optimistic that we can determine the source, fate, and transport, and determine the risk to human health and the environment.
So John, have you determined what kind of PFAS it is, given there's about 9,500 different versions?
The Commonwealth requires us to look at 6 PFAS compounds, that's what we're looking at. We don't look at the entire suite of PFAS compounds because most of them are unregulated. The other problem is the analytical techniques to identify them are not there. So right now, the Commonwealth requires us to look at the risk associated with 6 specific PFAS, and that's what we do.
And do you guys have any jump to conclusion as far as what the source is?
Right now, we don't. I mean, there has been some firefighting activity on the site, but it looks like foam wasn't used. I mean, it could be just, you know, there is some industrial processes and coatings and other things that have PFAS in it, so perhaps some painting operation or something like that. We just need to really dig in. We've done a lot of soil sampling out there. We don't see PFAS in soil, so it's going to be a little bit of a head scratcher, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
And as Seth pointed out, it looks like the higher concentrations are up grading, so there may be an off-site source of the PFAS. Where, at the end of the day, I'm confident we will come to a conclusion where the PFAS is coming from, and then come with a recommendation how to address the concern.
So up gradient to the west or to the north, or what? What are you talking about?
To where HA19 and HA20 are.
The map is so small, I have no idea where that is on.
Update is near. It would be to the south of the facility.
Oh, wow. So, okay, so you'll be able to get me this slideshow so that we can post it?
Yes,
absolutely. You'll be able to get
I'll
this?
send you those.
Okay, Hi.
I'll send you those 2 references.
For him?
Yep. Hi, this is Mary Gatzlick. I have a question for you. Have you looked at I'm doing fine. Have you looked at the drinking water that the town of Plymouth has? Has that been tested for PFAS? Because you did mention that it is potentially present in drinking water. I'm just curious whether or not that could be a source with people with septic systems in the area, gradient water flowing that way.
I have not looked at it recently, and I don't know if they filed this Water Act information for this year. I know the department does have a program going, looking at wastewater treatment plants and municipal water supplies. So that's something we have not checked recently.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. That's a very good question. It is just as a side, it is a problem throughout the Commonwealth as well as throughout the country.
I have a quick question. Has the site used fertilizer that has resulted from sludge, the sludge to fertilizer issue? And if that be the case, first it would be great to determine whether that had been used, and then to determine whether the monitoring wells or in soil samples would be in the areas likely to have been fertilized.
That's a great question. In fact, in the state of Maine, fertilizer problem is a big problem. When you look at the site, I would say probably a good 90% of the site here is covered with pavement or structures. There's not a lot of gardening going around, either grass or people growing things on the site. So the likelihood of fertilizer being used is probably quite limited, that's for sure.
To answer your question specifically on wastewater treatment refuse, in the time that I've been at the plant, the solid refuse was never used as fertilizer for...
No. You can buy, fertilizer, a lawn company can buy that. That's what I'm referring to. There was a trend to use sludge for fertilizer, and it was sold at your local hardware stores, et cetera. It's a big issue.
Yeah.
Is this certain
Shows your
company
cooking ware.
in particular?
I know that, but I was just
Thanks, John.
looking for a source, fine.
And Mike, if you have any other questions, NDCAP have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Send an email, obviously, to Dave, and then you can answer any questions you have. I just want to be open and transparent and make sure you get the information you need to satisfy any questions you have.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I apologize for going quick, I just want to go home.
No.
Yeah.
No, they don't want to go home.
They want to talk, they want to speak.
I want to finish. I want to be able to work tomorrow. Thanks very much. We have Jim Cantwell who wants to address the public. Jim, are you still
Thank you,
there?
Madam Chair. Those present, I apologize for not being there in person, so I let the Senator's Boston office. And I have the tremendous honor of being Ed Markey's State Director. I'm joined by Ben Thomas and Katie Morthville from our office, and I know my very close friend, Congressman Keating's State Director, and Caleb White, who's with Senator Warren's office, are also monitoring this call as they do every single meeting. I have a brief statement from the Senator. We were planning to come in September. We still will come in September because there'll be much more information to provide at that time. But just for folks who are there tonight, the Senator's statement, as we stand together to prevent any dangerous discharge into our Cape Cod Bay, I want to acknowledge and applaud the formidable grassroots community-based movement that's been led by the groups that are there with you all tonight. This movement consists of so many, but the Senator always wants to reference Mary and Jim Lampert of Pilgrim Watch, Diane Turco of Cape Cod Downwinders, and our close friend Beth Cassoni of the Mass Lobstermen Association, among many others who were there tonight. When it comes to protecting our public health, we don't agonize, we organize, and these groups have shown this. From environmentalists to fishermen, concerned citizens to local leaders, there's a broad and powerful coalition of stakeholders opposed to Holtec's proposal to dump 1 million gallons of radioactive water into our Cape Cod Bay. Thanks to your tireless advocacy and those who are there tonight, Holtec has been forced to come to terms with the fact that we're fighting back and we won't give up. During the field hearing of the Environment and Public Works Subcommittee on Clean Energy, Air, Climate, and Nuclear Safety at Plymouth Town Hall that Senator Markey chaired on May 6th, Holtec committed that it would not discharge any radioactive contaminated water into Cape Cod Bay from Pilgrim without the consent of stakeholders. Holtec also agreed that it would work with an independent body of marine experts to test the water before one of the 4 options of disposal would be taken or considered. These are critical commitments, and we intend to hold Holtec accountable to ensure that these are fulfilled. The Senator concludes that currently my team and I are in the process of engaging with Holtec, state and federal agencies, and independent institutions to better understand their testing capacity, sampling and analysis methods, and monitoring needs, which will inform how Holtec can abide by its independent testing commitment and the requirements of our friends at the EPA. The public must have a say in how Holtec's waste is disposed, especially when other viable options exist. And the NRC must do more to prioritize community safety and community voices throughout this decommissioning process, not just here in Massachusetts, but everywhere in our country. The people closest to the problems must be the people closest to the solutions. Senator Markey looks forward to continuing to work with all of you to halt Holtec. Thank you. We'll come back in September. We have a list of the groups that we're working with, and we'd intend to be able to give a more thorough report in September.
And methods for co-sampling, yeah?
Absolutely. I think that's this question. One is there will be already, it's our understanding of the commitment from Holtec, and independent analysts will be present when sampling is done. Both Henrietta and Pixie had asked about that. Also, a commitment that we have of split sampling to be done. So with that independent group there, as a sample is taken, it then gets split, sent to DEP from the state, and to an independent group that's doing the testing So that'd be one, and then separately from Holtec and doing its analysis. So there would be, it's our understanding that we already have in our consultation and our negotiations and discussions with Holtec and others that there will be split sampling done as well, which addresses Henrietta's great question and Pixie's as well.
Your understanding that split sampling will be done, do we know who's going to do it?
We do not. We have,
Okay.
For the organizations that have been, there are multiple groups that we've been talking with. We've been working with the Interstate New England Water Pollution Control Commission. We've been working with folks at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute for their capacity for testing and getting the results. We've been working with NOAA and the Department of Energy because they've been dealing with these things. We've requested meetings with Mass Executive Office of Health and Human Services. We've been in consultation with DEP. There's a lot of work happening right now concurrently, and we look forward to coming back in September when we have a little bit more information to share, but clearly well before any decision of the 4 options are made. And just to reiterate Senator Markey's position, he's opposed to any harmful discharge of any of this radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Jim. Appreciate your time and effort to come and the senator's work as well. Mike, you good? Are you holding your head in agony?
No, I'm good, fine.
Okay.
Just Mike Jackson from Carnes Keating's office. Just to reiterate, Carnes Keating's continued opposition to the discharge of the spent fuel water into the Plymouth Bay. We've been working with Senator Markey, Senator Warren's office, and the state delegation as well to make sure that the agencies that are supposed to be doing their jobs are doing it. And I won't take any more time because I want to hear what the folks who were in the room have to say during the upcoming comment period. Thank you.
Okay, let's have at it then. Who wants to speak? One can not.
Could they line up?
Not yet.
Line up.
You can line up.
Line up, everybody.
Jim, you've had your say. You're not getting up again. Okay, good. Thank God. I would never. I will.
Is there a time? Is there going to be a time limit to the comments? Is there going to be a time limit to the comments?
So how many people do I have in line? 1, 2, 3. Keep it to 2 minutes, please. Go.
Good evening, members of the NDCAP committee and attendees. My name is Christine Silva. I currently serve as a board of director of South Shore Realtors and a past board of directors for the National Association of Realtors. It continues to baffle me as to why we must fight so hard for clean water. I am incredibly grateful to everyone here tonight. Without your diligence and persistent efforts, we would not have come this far. My duty as a realtor is to protect homeowners' rights to use their properties as they wish, the freedom to buy, sell, and utilize property as protected by the Fifth Amendment, which underlies all real estate transactions. Any restrictions, such as the proposed dumping, will surely place a property owner from realizing the highest and best use of their property, as well as hindering economic growth and development here on the South Shore and beyond. Currently, we are now experiencing the impact of the proposed plans within our markets. Clients are losing interest in the area due to the concerns about pollution, negative health impacts, and the long-term value loss. The numbers corroborate our observations, with fewer sales and lower prices when compared to the statewide averages. The average single-family home sale price from January through April 2022 in Plymouth, home to the Pilgrim Nuclear Station, was 12% lower than statewide averages. Meanwhile, through the number of homes sold dropped across Massachusetts during that period. The drop was far more pronounced across the South Shore, a decrease of 50% more than the statewide averages, And this data comes from the Massachusetts Association of Realtors. There are alternatives to dumping. Even if those options are expensive, there are considerable financial resources already provided to Holtec. Not one drop.
Yes. My name is Barry Potvin. I'm the chair of the Board of Health here in Plymouth. I'm speaking both on behalf of them and also on behalf of myself as a concerned citizen. There's a few things I'd like to make everyone, really aware of. One is that tritium, which is a form of hydrogen, is something which cannot easily be eliminated from water. If you're exposed to 10 rems of radioactive material, and note that this is over a lifetime, it's cumulative damage. It causes about a 1% increase in cancer. So for 63,000 people here in Plymouth, that means another 630 cases of cancer that would not have happened otherwise. It's important that you know that. Also, in terms of PFAS, the Board of Health has been looking at this problem for quite some time. I'm aware of the concentrations of PFAS in the wells here in Plymouth, how much is coming out of our aquifers. I'm aware of the sources. And the problem with PFAS is they call it forever chemicals, and even down to less than 20 parts per trillion. There's concern that it's a major cause of cancer. We can't have this stuff in the water that's being dispensed into Cape Cod Bay. We can't have PCBs in that water. You can probably eliminate those with filtration, but I challenge you to tell me, how are you going to eliminate massive amounts of tritium radioactive material before you discharge this water into Plymouth Bay? There's no way to do it. There's some things that are being tested. Doing it would take a long time and would be extraordinarily expensive. Other radioactive nuclides can be eliminated by filtration, but not that one. And I don't want to hear about it's only got a 12.6-year half-life, because 12.6 years is enough to get into the water, have it actually get into our shellfish and our fish, damage our economics, damage our fishing economy, damage our shellfishing economy, convince people that they shouldn't eat those products if they came from Plymouth Harbor and from Cape Cod Bay, and probably dissuade people from even visiting this area for vacations, because they wouldn't want to be exposed to it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane Turco, Director of Cape Town. Yes. Yep. Dr. Potvin.
You had mentioned that it was 10 rem. Are you sure of that number?
Yes, it's 10 rem or 100 millisieverts.
10 rem seems like an awfully high number. That's why I was questioning it.
No, it's very, very small. I worked with radioactive materials for 5 decades as a research scientist and as a college professor, and I can tell you that that's a fairly small amount of radioactivity. It's, wait, just 1 second, 1 second, please, just a minute, please. In terms of tritium, the exposure is not so bad for just exposure to the surface of your body. It's a danger when you ingest it.
But 10 rem of exposure is a sensationalized number. I mean, consider, you could continually drink the water that is currently being stored at Pilgrim and never see 10 rem of exposure from that tritium. Would I?
I wouldn't drink it. I work with radioactive material, and I would not drink water that had 10 rems in it.
Jack, were you going to say something?
No, the numbers are sensationalized.
Wow.
We're providing the disinformation. I think everybody agrees, in the audience, we're working to come up with a good solution to address this water, right? We don't want it in the bay. The community doesn't want it in the bay. We're working hard to convince Holtec that there's better alternatives to disposal of water. So the important part is, I think we need to remain factual. We don't need to scare people. We don't need to throw crazy numbers out. We want to stick to the facts and convince Holtec it's in the best interest of our community to figure out a solution to safely remove that water from the station.
I agree.
That's it.
I think you owe an apology to Dr. Potvin. You owe him an apology, Jack. That was really inappropriate. So I'm going to start now because it's been a lot of time, but anyways, I'm Diane Turco from...
Oh, just hold on a minute.
I'm
Diane, hold
yes.
on a minute, please.
Oh, shut off.
I'm not disagreeing with the doctor that there's risk from exposure to radioactive material, but the fact is the releases the releases to the bay are not 10 rem. They're a small fraction of 1 millirem, which is 1/1000th of a rem. The number that he said is 10,000 times higher. So let's stay factual. The point is, any amount of radioactive exposure that's unnecessary can be a public health concern. And what we're trying to do is minimize that. So I appreciate, the engagement of the people in the community that are working to get a better solution, to get past this water issue and get that plant cleaned up and that site restored.
Well, one thing I would say is we don't want to reduce exposure, we want to eliminate exposure. None.
I
There
think
is
it's
no
too late
safe
for that.
level.
Diane, are you
radioactive
starting?
materials.
Is this your-
So let me start.
I've started. You
I
okay?
just wanted to
Yep.
let the public know that radionuclides have been going into our environment from Pilgrim forever. This is a
For 50
1988
years, not
study
ever.
done by Senator Kennedy that talks about tritium, cesium-137, cobalt-60, attributed to Pilgrim Nuclear Power
That's
Station.
what we're cleaning up,
So
right?
what we're saying is not one more drop. So the EPA has said you can't dump. The Attorney General has said you can't dump. The Conservation Law Foundation has said you can't dump. Senator Markey's staff, Jim Cantwell, said Holtec. Senator Warren, everyone, 20 communities that surround the bay have voted in their towns as stakeholders, have said, don't dump, don't discharge. And yet Holtec has that as their primary plan. You're not kidding us by saying, oh, we're thinking about it. We know you're doing it. You've taken trucking off the table. You've downplayed any evaporation that is not going to happen, and that's it. So Senator Moran talked about legislation that would halt the plan for 2 years while they looked at the economic and environmental impact of discharging into Cape Cod Bay. When that law passes, will Holtec honor that law and not discharge for 2 years while the study is being undertaken?
I've told you that if a state law is on the books that prevents us from discharging, we will not discharge.
But there already are, as Jim said, there already are laws on the books that would prevent discharging from the Marine Sanctuary Act.
Is the Marine Sanctuary Act the same as it's been for the past 40 years?
Yeah.
And was...
That really doesn't
Would-
matter. It's a state law, you agreed with the Attorney General, but you're thumbing your nose at the Attorney General by not taking discharging off the table. She said don't discharge. The states are, in DEP, even Seth Pickering said, they don't agree with, they agree with the EPA not to discharge, and
Not-
yet it's still your plan.
Not to discharge water containing pollutants. Not to discharge spent fuel pool water
Is
containing
tritium a
pollutants.
pollutant?
Tritium is not a pollutant under the
Okay.
definition
Wait a
of
minute,
an FD's
would you
permit.
listen to the...
You know what, we're
residents?
tired of this cat and mouse game that you are playing.
Well, would you please listen to the rest of his sentence before you jump all over him?
You know what?
Gee. All right, Diane, excuse me?
Okay, identify how tritium is not a pollutant.
The pollutants have...
It's in the ocean.
Okay, go ahead.
Pollutants have a specific list of what is or is not a pollutant under the Clean Water Act. Radiological byproducts, byproducts that are radiological of the fission process are exempt from the Clean
We know
Water Act.
that. We know that.
By definition
We
and
know
by
that.
regulation.
Okay,
They
so
are regulated by the NRC.
you know what, we understand that. What the public is here tonight and across the state, all of Cape Cod are saying, we are saying, don't dump radioactive water into Cape Cod Bay, period. Doesn't matter what the NRC says, it doesn't matter what the EPA says. The people are trying to protect their commons and our community.
No, they're not. They're trying to, no.
What?
Forget it.
We are, so.
No, you're not.
You have other options.
Okay, that's
You
it.
have other
No,
options
nope.
to take care of the water. We don't understand
Sit,
why you
Diane.
just won't follow through with a better option and support our communities. So you will follow Senator Moran's legislation when it passes. So it's going to impact your decommissioning for 2 years,
Next.
okay?
My name's Melissa Lunny. I'm a concerned citizen. I want to ask if there are any other examples of nuclear power plants discharging their holding tank water into the ocean.
Yeah, almost every single one that's located on an ocean, yes.
They do it as, like you intend to do.
Yes, in fact, if you look at San Onofre, they're doing it. Oyster Creek is discharging its water into the Atlantic Ocean, as are several operating plants up and down the east and west coasts of the United States.
Similar to Fukushima?
That's about to happen.
Fukushima, it was an accident, but they're still discharging from those holding tanks into the ocean.
They haven't yet, but they will next year.
No, they are. They are. No, I'm talking about.
She's using up her time that way.
And so the study that has been done because of the water that's being dumped in the Pacific Ocean, they're finding cesium in the sediment and in algae throughout those areas. Cesium-137. Now, is that a toxic radiation?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it is. And so, therefore, that is what you are asking us to, risk. Isn't it?
No, we haven't asked for the evaluation of discharge of cesium-137, no.
Well, it comes out.
You can filter.
It's in those holding tanks. And, I'm sure,
We commit to provide a detailed look of the radiological components of the water that would be intended to be discharged. We will do that at an upcoming meeting.
Okay.
Well, why do you chuckle? I don't understand. You asked me if we
you're
had cesium in the
asking-
water, and I committed to tell you what we have in the water. Why is that a chuckle?
because it's probably having faith in a corporation that is weighing out our welfare over their bottom line.
Okay,
And
that's enough.
That's it. So it was probably in line of
Okay,
a snicker.
that's more than 3 minutes, so could we move on?
It was.
Hi, I'm Caroline Howlett. I'm from Green Harbor in Marshfield. I have no questions about legalities. Just want to say that. I have questions about the environmental surveys and how they're going to be doing it with like the marine life. So I don't know if everybody here knows, but right now, the lobstering in this area isn't doing so well. And I'm wondering kind of about how like the water that's being dumped, how it's going to affect the different temperatures and the currents as they come through, what surveys are being done in that regard. And also if it is at any of the like non-radioactive pollutants, if they're going to be infecting like the molting season of the lobster. And if you guys have like any kind of work being done with DMF in regards to that in your surveys? You don't know?
I can tell you that our marine monitoring program looks at the impacts both from a hypothetical assessment of what we would potentially discharge to also sampling lobsters to determine whether those lobsters have in fact been affected by material that's been discharged from the plant. That's part of our environmental monitoring program.
Okay. So can I ask another question? Is it okay?
Yeah, you got another 45 seconds.
Oh, cool. So are there like any examples you can think of? Because like, you're in the nuclear business. I'm not. I don't do any of that. Or maybe actually you're demolition. I don't remember exactly what you said you were doing. But are there any examples where dumping this nuclear water damages the life of crustaceans and mollusks and all of these things that are happening that like aren't being included in the surveys of the results that we have already so far? Because if we're going to get all that information after you dump it with the lobsters that are here, that doesn't help us at all. We need to know what's going to happen with our lobsters before you dump the water. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know exactly how we can get that to
I agree.
started.
The studies are designed to be predictive, and those predictive studies establish limits with which we could not exceed at levels that would not have a negative impact on marine life.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I'm out of seconds. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Schlesinger, and I'm a summer resident of Eastham on the Cape. My question is about the 4 potential plans that Holtec has in place. So are the buildings that would be required for either shipment or evaporation something that's being demolished, like the trash compaction building? And then riding off of that, will Holtec ensure that all the infrastructure necessary for all 4 plans is in place and not demolished until all permits and plans are approved by the state government?
We can continue to support any of the 4 methods of disposal up until the time that the water is disposed of. So demolition of buildings that support any of the 4 options will not occur until after the decision has been made and the water's been dispositioned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How you doing? My name is Bob Murphy. I'm a concerned citizen. I live in Menomet. And I've heard tonight people are concerned about a couple of different parameters associated with the discharge of that water. One's the physical parameters of it. Number 2 is the chemistry. Number 3 is the rad content. And I think you should just, be aware that from what I can see is the physical parameters, which will include like temperature and pH, that can be treated. That's doable. The chemical component can always be treated. To even PFAS, all that stuff can be treated. The real issue of concern is the rad. Whatever components that happens to be, whether it's tritium, cesium, whatever that happens to be. It's very tricky to treat, and that's what really should be the focus of effort when you're looking at stuff that's going to be discharged from the power plant. So I think that with that in mind, it would potentially be helpful to have a rep from the NRC. They're the ones, it's not the DEP, it's not the EA, they don't do rad stuff. For rad stuff for nuclear power plants is the NRC. So I would recommend that in your meetings, I'm sure you have in the past, but maybe consider in the future to have, an appropriate NRC rep here who can give you some background stuff, because those are the people that you all need to approach.
No,
That's the biggest
We have a bunch of them online
concern.
right now listening to you. so-
Say again?
I said we have a bunch of them online right now listening to you.
Okay, all right. That's all I got, thank
They're
you.
generally with us.
Yeah. Yes.
The date of the studies, the NRC they should give the date of the studies, the NRC, that they are setting their allowable release standards upon. And you will find out they're antiquated. They go back, they don't go to the most recent, as they should, National Academy of Studies report.
Thank you, Mary.
And it's also worth noting that those studies are based solely on impact to adult males?
Just for correction,
They've given
that's
permission to
not,
dump.
that's not a true statement. It measures impacts on children, on infants, on individuals of each sex and age.
Actually,
Thank you. Next.
Yes, hi, my name's Larry Hartinian. I'm a resident of Plymouth. A couple of questions. If I understood correctly, there has already been some sampling and radiological analysis of the water that has been shared with the state, and we will hear about it at some point. Is that correct?
Well, so Dave made the presentation, what's going to be available through our website in his presentation. That information was presented to Mass DEP and EPA like this. No official submittal, but as a presentation.
Okay, but there has been radiological sampling and analysis?
Radiological?
Yes.
Jack, do you want to?
There has been radiological sampling that has been done. The results of that analysis will be presented at a future meeting.
And in detail?
Yes, and in detail.
Okay, thank you. So that's...
And there was split samples taken as well between the state DH and Holtec.
Okay, so...
The DEP and EPA permit that was identified does not have a, radiological component.
Okay, but the samples have been taken, and we will get that information. That's what I've heard, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Noyes, I believe, I understand that you said that the water that is currently there is not like the water that would be considered to be discharged, correct?
That's correct.
But I'm asking if Holtec, in its handling of the current water, and if its handling of the water that will be available in the future and potentially discharged, if Holtec is handling that according to protocols that would suggest that it might be radiologically contaminated.
We absolutely are. That water is, in fact, radiologically contaminated. But with each work activity that we perform underwater, we remove that water at the point of the activity being performed, filter it prior to returning it to the pool. So we are doing everything we can to maintain as high a degree of quality from a non-radiological and a radiological standpoint as possible.
And you're saying that radiological contamination can be filtered out?
Radiological contamination can, with the exception of tritium.
Okay.
Tritium is the only isotope, because of the fact that it is so similar to water, it cannot be removed through conventional scientific means.
Okay, so it seems to me that what Holtec is doing is that it's operating according to the precautionary principle, that this radiation could be damaging to the employees who are working with it, and consequently you're handling it according to these protocols. What we are saying is that the same precautionary principle should be adopted and that this water should not be released into the bay. We don't know the findings that are going to be coming out in the future. We do not want any radiological contamination released into the bay.
I understand that.
Hi, I'm Pat Watson, concerned citizen from East Bridgewater. And I heard a gentleman, I'm not sure which one, said that the NRC rules about releasing radioactive water is different than the laws of the state of Massachusetts. And so my question would be, it's not a question, it's more of a statement, that I want to make sure that Attorney General Maura Healey hears that we're being told by the NRC that they trump over our state laws. Is that a misinformation? I don't know, but I'd like it answered, and I hope that she addresses that question. Number two, the Plymouth chair of the Board of Health gave some information. Holtec's consultant insinuated his information was sensational, was disinformation. So my question is the consultant, Holtec's consultant, and hold on, let me finish my statement, thank you.
Which consultant are you talking about?
Is Holtec a consultant or whatever, I'm not, you can correct me if I got the wrong thing. And
He's from the Department of Public Health, Jack Priest, head of
He's the
radiation
radiological
control.
officer for the state.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, apologies. Are we getting disinformation from you? Are we getting disinformation from Holtec? Are you sensationalizing what your information you're giving us? Are you sensationalizing the information we get from us? Because I feel that that was very disrespectful of the chair of the Board of Health, saying he's given disinformation out and he's sensationalizing his information.
For him to tie 10 rem of exposure to discharges that are going to occur at the plant and discuss 660,000 cancers is irresponsible on his part. Absolutely irresponsible.
I'm sorry, but I think we are all educated here, and we know the EPA, all good and, great work, EPA. But we know the EPA does not always live up to its expectations that we have, and that there is cancer-causing stuff going all the time. It's not being regulated the way it is. The limitations and the numbers are not always correct.
That's right.
And I don't think
Thank
anybody in
you.
this room, or probably in this state or this country, believes everything that comes out of EPA. I'm sorry to say that. I hope they work harder for us, and I hope they protect us. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the honorable members of the panel for letting me address you. My name is Dr. Benjamin Cronin. I grew up and reside in Duxbury, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation in history on the towns of early Plymouth County, particularly the way that they regulated and preserved their common resources, both resources of water and of land. I wish to speak first in the general and the abstract, and it won't be too long a lecture, I promise, and then in the specific and concrete about the issues that are in question this evening. These issues pertain, of course, to our environment, the vitality of our economy, and ultimately to self-government and democracy. I want to talk a little bit about history, local history, before we talk about Holtec and Pilgrim. It's important to note, I think, that from an early date, the town meetings of communities like Plymouth, like Duxbury, like Kingston, vigilantly guarded their common resources. In fact, if you go and look at early town meetings, it's the thing that they spend the most time on, a lot of time on herring. You actually can trace this back, of course, to England. It goes back to Magna Carta. It's actually part of the common law, and it even goes back to the Roman law. The Wampanoag, who were the first inhabitants of these lands, likewise had and have an active commons tradition, a corpus of traditional knowledge and management ways that extend back millennia. In fact, the reason that we have such a green and pleasant land beside blue and productive waters is this common tradition, strong commons tradition. And so it's in defense of our commons, I believe, that many of us are here tonight, specifically the dumping of irradiated wastewater that is proposed by Holtec into our bays. As other speakers may have alluded to, it's contrary not only to the law, which I'll touch on in a moment, but to the democratic and sovereign will of the people of the towns beside Cape Cod Bay, all of the towns on Cape Cod, all of the towns on Martha's Vineyard, Duxbury, Scituate, the Plymouth Select Board chairwoman we heard from tonight. All of the foregoing towns have, excluding Plymouth, whose Select Board member addressed us, have passed either town meeting articles or voted upon ballot questions, and they're typically by overwhelming margins. Scituate was 85 to 15%, that unequivocally oppose this invasion of our oceanic commons. So the people, often in the most directly democratic form possible, the New England town meeting, have made their opposition very well known. In economic terms, we have the fishing industry, we have the real estate sector, we have hospitality and tourism that are deeply opposed. And I think it's notable that the general revulsion at this proposal from Holtec is uniting people who would never agree on the same candidate. I can guarantee that. Now, we know that the popular will has not been Okay. I'll try to compromise between you. Okay, I'll thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd just like to read a brief quote from the EPA letter that was referenced, and I think it's brief given the length of the letter. It's a scathing letter. I encourage everyone to read it. The lawyers among us will recognize that it is what the youth call a smackdown. The EPA notes that Holtec has a novel interpretation of its own NDPS permit. It notes that this, quote, novel interpretation through which you attempt to narrow the permit's prohibition of wastewater discharges to, quote, unquote, untreated effluent directly conflicts with the, quote, unquote, plain language of the permit. The EPA continues, your reading of the permit is in fact plainly inconsistent. Emphasis in the original with the unambiguous provisions of the permit. They go on to say that Holtec is welcome to apply for a new permit, but that the interpretation put forward by Mr. Trice, the president of HDI, a subsidiary of Holtec in charge of decommissioning, is contrary. It in fact flies in the face of the plain understanding of the NDPS agreement and the memorandum of understanding referenced in the letter. So I wish the honorable members of the committee would take all the foregoing into consideration and reject the dumping. Thank you.
Let me just say that it's not our authority, okay? Go ahead. Thanks. Gotcha.
Hi, my name is Elle Jarvis. I'm a resident of Marshfield, Massachusetts. And my question is twofold, primarily for the panel and our state legislatures. I am a small business owner. My livelihood and that of my community is greatly impacted by the commercial fishing industry. In Massachusetts, and it's over $1 billion industry. And my question is to the panel, our state legislature, and Holtec. Over the past several years, there have been more and more government regulations that's making it increasingly hard for commercial fishermen to continue their livelihoods and have a robust fishing industry in Massachusetts. Has anybody on the panel or in these discussions engaged any sort of advocacy group or association that advocates for the commercial industry? Also, secondfold, if this dumping happens, who is socially, financially responsible for the catastrophic public relations fallout that will happen once this dumping happens? I am fortunate to host clients from all over the world that come here for vacation. We take them on lobster charters, we take them on farming tours, and they go home, and the Massachusetts industry is not as strong as it is in Maine right now, solely because Maine has a better marketing strategy. But if this happens, our industry in Massachusetts, not only in Cape Cod Bay, but on the North Shore as well, is over. So that's my question. Who's socially and financially responsible if this dumping happens for the entire commercial fishing industry in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
That's a wonderful question.
Thank you.
Holtec is responsible, but they are a limited liability company.
They have no assets. May I proceed? Okay, thank you. So I'm Christine Danielson. I'm a part of Save Our Bay. I'm also a member of the Citizens Climate Lobby Group. And also I'm also a member of the Water Conservation Committee in Plymouth. So kind of, invested in this whole kind of thing. Oh, the Water Conservation Committee? Plymouth. Yep. I'm not speaking on behalf of them. I'm just letting you know my credentials. So my question is regarding the ability to handle the increase and influx of cancer within the community that will occur. I asked the same question at NRC, and I've yet to receive an adequate answer. So how will Holtec ensure and look every single person at this meeting right now dead in the face and say that this is not going to be an issue and that Plymouth Hospital is going to be able to adequately handle an influx like that? Mr. Noyes?
How I would do that is to tell you that we will evaluate the radiological implications associated with the discharge, if that is what we choose to do, and we will understand exactly what the environmental impact is and is not.
But time and time again, we've seen this increase in this influx, but nothing seemed to change, and your plans have not changed either. So I don't see that being an adequate response.
So the influx of cancers
Yes.
are associated with what?
All
That you've seen?
literally the power plant, dumping the water, just all the above. I mean,
Are you aware that the state of Massachusetts evaluated the numbers of cancers in Plymouth County and determined that it had no relationship to the operation of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station?
That's
If
false
you're referring to
information.
the Southeast Massachusetts Health Study, you're incorrect.
That would be incorrect, Mr. Noyes. That's incorrect. Also, you know, just for a little background, my first 18 years of my life, I grew up on a Superfund site. That was my backyard. That's where my swing set was. I don't want to see that happen to other children. I don't want to see other children be exposed to things like that. I don't want to see other people be exposed to cancer. How do you plan on addressing that to these little kids? We're going to put a playground on...
They're doing I don't know what they're addressing it by doing the sampling that's being asked and trying to follow the regulations.
The sampling that's done by Holtec scientists.
Right now, because they're not finished using the water.
This is...
They're not going to do that when it's prepared.
I'd like to remind you that as an NDCAP member, you're supposed to hold specific decorum to all of these members and all of these citizens. You're not withholding proper decorum. You're being condescending and rude to every single person here today. Raise your hand if you think she's being condescending. Oh, what do you know?
That's a real surprise from
Thank you.
some of you guys back there. Thank you, good night. Good night. Excuse me?
I work there.
Work at Pilgrim? Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Okay, motion is on the table to adjourn this meeting.
Want a second? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I felt compelled to, being that I am a commercial fisherman. And, yeah, that's... Excuse me?
Yeah.
So, my name is Stephen Carver, and for those of you from Plymouth, you probably recognize my last name. Yeah, my family's been here since 1620, and, rub your eyes. We've been associated with Cape Cod Bay for well over 400 years, and I happen to also have a degree in marine fisheries biology, and for lobstering specifically, that's my focus, obviously. A lobster takes 7 years from larval stage to when it meets the consumer. So I don't think a study can be properly done or conclusively done to determine long-term effects of what you may be planning. And, you know, I just want to ensure that my son and future generations can make a living out here on Cape Cod Bay. That's about all I have to say.
Madam Chairman, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I'd second.
Any further discussion on adjourning? All in favor, raise your hand. That looks unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody.